So we're going to start in a minute, but I just wanted to say this again for folks that are just arriving. Please sign in at the little podium right at the door if you haven't. There will be two opportunities to, it felt like a few minutes ago, most of the folks here were here to talk about rental registry. The way the night's going to work, we're going to have public to be heard in a couple minutes, which is an opportunity for folks to share comments about anything they'd like. And after that, we're going to go into a public hearing on the budget, which that conversation will last maybe 20 to 30 minutes, probably closer to 20. Then we're going to talk about a library grant application, which will probably be about 10 minutes. And then we're going to move into the rental registry. We'll probably talk about the rental registry for 20 to 30 minutes. And after that, there'll be an opportunity for more comment. So
the question is, there a reason why you're splitting it up? Can't you just do the rental registry all in one shot at the beginning?
we are doing rental registry all in its order, but we're trying to give you an opportunity.
All together instead of separating it. You're limited on seats, and there's plenty. Someone can have my seat. I'll stand. You're limited on seats, and I don't see the sense in splitting it up. To be honest with you, don't you guys have the authority to agree on it and change it?
We're not splitting it. That's just where it lands in the agenda tonight because we're prioritizing the budget tonight.
Yeah, but can you move it is the question.
So,
I mean, what's the stopping?
so just to be clear, so the public hearing has to happen.
Yeah.
So regardless, there'd be two
Right.
opportunities.
What she's asking is, can we?
No,
move
and
it?
here's why we can't. Because the budget conversation needs to happen around the budget. They're intertwined, I believe, right?
Well, you believe, or is it?
No.
Actually, no, we can.
You can, then please do it for everybody. I mean,
I think we've warned this the way it is, and people may be joining online in other ways, expecting to hear the budget and not want to wait an hour for that to
they're
come.
listening right now, so they can see how it changes. If they're online, they're at home. These people are standing here. You take, no, I'm fine. I'm not gonna take a seat when there's people standing. Because I'm already not.
I think it'd be okay if you wanted to move 5A lower.
Okay. Yeah, we don't need to, there's nobody here to talk about that, right? We need-
I know it's, he's trying to discourage everybody. And I know I can put a city, but people.
I appreciate that sentiment. Harlan, are you here for the library still?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we're gonna move you to, no, I mean, to your section, we're gonna move to after, to later on in the meeting. After rental registry. So we're gonna start with the public hearing on the budget, and we're gonna go right into rental registry.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about your library part. All right, and we'll do that part in the agenda additions and changes. So is everybody ready? Great.
Wait, let me hear. Record.
Recording in progress.
Now we're good.
All right, I'll call the City of Essex Junction City Council meeting for Wednesday, February 28th, 2024 to order. Are there any agenda additions or changes? Yes. We will move 5A to 5B, and 5B will become 5A. And we don't need to do anything else then, right? No. Okay. Could I get if there's nothing else, can I get a motion on that?
So moved.
Second. Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Awesome. All right, so as I said, now is an opportunity, if you don't want to wait around until after, or if you have something else you want to talk about, this is an opportunity for those in the room and those online to bring comments about any topic, not just what we're talking about this evening. Anybody who wants to say anything, sure, come on up and
Where you
sit in the chair right next to where you're sitting.
Okay.
Give us your name and
Sure. I'm Edward Liamas. I own 5456 Park Street.
where do you live in Essex Junction or where?
I do not.
Okay.
I'm a property owner in Essex Junction. So I own 8 units in Essex Junction, and I also own 8 units in Burlington. And I've also been a real estate broker for 35 years. So I have a unique perspective on your rental fees that you want to implement. Okay. Now the city of Burlington's been doing it for years. Okay, and how can I explain this? They probably have 7 or 8 inspectors for the city of Burlington, and because like you want to do, they want to inspect once every 5 years if your property is in good shape. If not, they try to inspect every other year, okay? But they get the fee from me every year of $110 per unit times 8, so $880 on top of the $23,000 of property taxes I pay, okay? It's been a pleasure owning property in Essex Junction because when I bought my buildings, they weren't in great shape, and when I came in here to change windows, to change roofs, I kept on saying, I'm here for a permit. Well, if you're putting the same roof on, you don't need a permit. Great. Okay. Where in Burlington, everything's a fee. If I want to change a broken window, I need a permit, which costs $80 to open and $80 to close for a broken window. Burlington has made fees. It's almost like the mafia. If you want to own property in Burlington, you got to pay up. Okay. And to maintain it. Where in Essex Junction, as long as you don't change anything but want to keep it the same or make it better, it's like it's always been. Just do it. And it's been a pleasure owning property here, okay? And the developers obviously like being here because in the last 10 years this place has grown like crazy. And I congratulate you for making obviously easier for developers to come in here and do this stuff. And you're reaping the benefits now. With all these extra apartments and restaurants and bars down here, taxes got to be coming in pretty good. Okay? Now, the inspection fee of $110 a year, nominal amount of money, not much, okay? But, in my buildings, I have 3 Section 8 tenants, 75-year-old lady, a single mom with a daughter, okay? And when I say to them, now when we renew your lease, I gotta get $110 from you because I'm not gonna eat it because I'm paying property taxes as it is. I'm paying for the water and sewer bills. It's just another fee that you guys are throwing on top of people to make things more unaffordable. Okay, and it's only $110, but it's $880, or if you have 50 units, it's a lot. Okay, and I think you guys can get revenue somewhere else other than this. And the properties around town, once again, being a realtor for 35 years, I've been in most of them. If an apartment house comes on the market, I'm in it. And what happens is if one's in bad shape, the guy who buys it redoes it. It makes it better. So I see no reason to have an inspector coming in anybody's apartment houses or whether you're expanding it to condominiums. It's just a money grab on your part, and you're better than this.
Okay, thanks. Is there anyone else in the room that wants to, sure, come on up and just share your name with us and where you're from?
Lisa Johnson, and I live right across the street here. In regards to this fee that you're looking to implement, I don't know if you realize what this is going to do to, as he said, people who are on Section 8, families with one income or on a fixed income, people who live paycheck to paycheck. That's going to be added on to our rent. And yeah, it's not a lot when you spread it over the year, but then we also have increases in our rent. You have school taxes that are going to go up. There's people who, and I know this through my profession, cannot afford a $2 copay for a medication that's going to keep them alive. That they have to find funding to get help in order to be able to pick up that prescription every month. I'm sure you have access to the food banks here. People do not have food. That it's expensive. You can't even eat healthy unless you have money because of the cost of food. And there's definitely other ways you guys could get this kind of money instead of passing it on to the residents here that, are living paycheck to paycheck and barely surviving if they can even have food on the table 7 days a week. And provide for the ones who have kids. All the expenses to sending a child to school these days is a costly venture also. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this or anything else? Come on up.
David Harrington, and I also live across the street here at 15 Park Street. I also am opposed to this fee. I think that, we all know it's no secret there's an affordability problem in Vermont as a whole, especially here in Chittenden County. I live in Essex Junction because it was somewhat affordable. I live on a fixed income, and with the increase in Blue Cross Blue Shield this year, my monthly salary just went down by $122, even though I got a cost of living increase through Social Security. So I'll echo what other people are going to say, that there's a lot of people on fixed incomes, and this may seem like $10 a month is not a big deal, but in fact, it's one more step away from affordability when you start looking at what we're going to be looking at in property tax increases, school taxes, and I just think that you should rethink this whole thing. And there's other alternatives. If people have problems with their apartment or their landlord, there's all kinds of tenant rights that are available to them. There's a lot of things that they can do if they have a problem with their apartment. They have recourse other than looking at the Village of Essex Junction to collect that fee and to have inspectors come in. There's people at the state level, people at the county level, even in the village. I would imagine there's people here that can look into those problems. So it's when you have a good stock of apartments here, I think for those few rare instances where you have problems, there's other recourse other than looking towards this fee to generate revenue. So I appreciate you entertaining us early on.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Can we keep the applause? This is a meeting. Let's keep the applause to a minimum, please. Thank you. Bridget, did you want to? Sure. Are you coming up?
What's your step?
Oh my gosh. I did it gracefully. 78-year-old.
You okay?
Yeah, fine. Good thing I have no fear. I'm going to get up on my minuscule soapbox and advocate for a rental registry. I own property in Burlington, and I've owned a duplex in Winooski since 1978, which is rented now. I have a lot of experience with the rental registry in both of those communities. I think that it is a good thing for tenants and a good thing for property owners to know that their properties are safe and healthy for the tenants that are there. And I think we're approaching this a little incorrectly. I think what we need to do is ask ourselves, each other, do we here in Essex Junction want renters to live in safe and healthy rental units, apartments? We'd probably all answer yes. So then how do we do it? That's the big question for me. In Winooski and Burlington, this has guaranteed. I've had tenants, prospective tenants, ask me for my inspection sheet so they can see that the things that the municipalities have suggested have been done, and that they inspect every 5 years in each of my rental properties. The building owner is there, me. I'm there. It takes about 45 minutes in my duplex to inspect, and I am grateful for this. It's $115 a year for each of my units, 3 all told, and I did not pass it on to the tenants. I thought, this is something that's important, and if the municipality isn't willing to do it, who is? And I think that a lot of the comments made at the first rental registry hearing are answered by Mr. Ewan in his part or this part of the packet for tonight. So I hope if you have questions about the things that came up before, you are looking at that first to see what he has said. I really believe this would be a good thing for the city. I think that we need to guarantee that people are living in safe and healthy housing. And I've seen substandard housing here in the Junction, and we don't want that, or I don't want that. You'll have to answer for yourselves, but I definitely don't want that. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to share comments? Brian, come on in. Oh, sorry. Your step. So I'm just going to ask, I didn't want to interrupt the speaker prior. Please address your comments to the board, not the folks that.
Mr. President. My name's Brian Sheldon, and I live in Essex Junction. I myself am a small landlord, but not in Vermont. I own or used to own rental properties in Texas, DC, and Chicago. DC requires landlord registration. The other two jurisdictions do not. But I can tell you, it's just not that onerous. There was a form, a stamp, $100, and an inspection. I didn't even have to go to the inspection. Therefore, I rise in support for, well, I sit in support for the rental registry here in Essex Junction. There's several reasons I do that. Number one is tenant safety. Consider for a second a basement apartment that only has one exit. What happens if there's a fire? I'll tell you, that tenant is going to die. That's what the stakes are. Let's not mince words about what the stakes are here. Secondly, user fees. User fees are better than taxes. Under this proposal, the staff to perform these needed inspections are paid for the folks that are causing the expense and are profiting on the expense. The only other way to pay for these staffers is to raise taxes on everybody. And why am I, as a non-landlord in this jurisdiction, being asked to subsidize the for-profit landlords in the community? Whenever we can match a city expense with the minority of folks that are causing it is a good thing. The last thing I'd like to leave the council with is if our landlords can't afford $150 a year, what are they going to do when a refrigerator fails? I think they protest too much. I support a rental registry, and I hope the city implements one. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's not interrupt, folks, please. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Great. Come on. Hi.
Hi, I'm Rolinda Coral. I'd like to say, for starters, that
Sorry, do you live in, or where are you from?
Essex Junction,
Sorry.
own property here. For starters, I am tired of everybody having to pay for the misbehaved people. I have an apartment. Matter of fact, it was 15, 18 years ago, whatever, that the village of Essex Junction allowed it. And back then, like now, they wanted apartments because there's a shortage also back then in Essex Junction. They approved it. And I have had at least 15 tenants. Some have been 6 months only because they wanted to, one had a crisis, and I'm like, I'll let you out of your lease. I've never had a problem renting it. None of my tenants will tell you that there's any complaint. You want to know why? Because I take care of my stuff. And I believe everybody here does. The ones you're going after are the slumlords that they don't care. You can find them all they want, but you're coming after us. And who's going to end up getting it? Well, somebody mentioned, well, they pay for it themselves. That's fine and dandy, but are they on Social Security? People assume because somebody has a rental that they're rich. No, you're not. You'd be surprised to see what the bottom line is. As far as if a refrigerator breaks, well, guess what? You don't sock it on the person right there. You pay for it, but that goes in your overhead. If you see it's getting worse and worse, what are your choices? Are you going to go and work for some place and not get paid? Matter of fact, pay them. So it boils down to stop coming after. You're nickeling, diming at everything. Vermont is extremely expensive, and it's getting worse. So it's time, listen to the people, okay? Because people are saying that it's mean to pass it on to the tenant. Yeah, it may sound it, but if they're willing to pay the price, then fine. I say whoever's for it, why don't you start a fund and put your money towards it and let people use that. So it just boils down to, why don't you put responsibility where it belongs, not on everybody, on the ones that have got that are slumlords.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to make a comment tonight? Come on up. I don't see anyone. Regina, do you? I'm not seeing anyone online either.
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
How's it going? My name's Brett Grabowski. I own actually 4 Pearl Street across the street in 11 Park. from reading over Chris's comments here and the notes that you guys are reviewing this evening, in this whole rental registry program, I really believe you guys are looking to solve a problem that doesn't exist. You know, if you look at the statistics basically that Chris has actually provided in the memo itself, over the course of, you know, you already do have a process in place in regards to if rental tenants feel that they are living in a substandard situation, they have problems, there is an avenue for them to complain right now, or to bring concerns to the city in regards to through the health inspector. If you look at Chris's numbers that he's provided to you with the memo this evening, over the course of the last year, there were 54 complaints total. 10 of those were basically, they believe, related to specific rental housing. And of those 10, 2 basically needed corrective action. So what I feel is that, you know, some of the other comments that were in here in regards to the fire department and knowing rental units and having an idea of the buildings and safety, and that process already exists when we come in, myself, permit or propose a building. We discuss it with the fire department. The fire department reviews the plans. They are aware of the number of units in a building. They are aware of the safety measures and everything we are required to do. So what I feel is there's also some discussions about, you know, the process that's already in place in regards at the state level, and how there is a complaint process for tenants to actually call the state, and the state is very responsive to actually looking into those issues. So what I'm seeing here is a very large cost to create really a redundant program that, in all honesty, if you look at the numbers, is really not necessary. The numbers just don't drive the costs that are going to be passed on to the landlords and eventually passed on to the tenants themselves.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments they'd like to make? Come on up.
Good evening, Mr. President, esteemed members of the council. Jason Struthers of Taft Street. I'll keep it brief as possible. I am among those that are in opposition to the rental registry program. So my first question is, given that the overwhelming majority of input from people has been in opposition, how much input from the public does it take before you drop it?
We're not answering questions right now.
You don't answer any questions. Okay, well, so the other point that I find undesirable about the program is that you're only providing services once out of every 5 years, but you're collecting fees every year. So 5 to 1, that's not a really good ratio to keep paying. And so if the council isn't going to drop this, can it be added to the ballot so the people can vote on it?
There is already a process for adding items.
Without having to, gather the 550 signatures.
Not at this time.
Okay, that's all I have. Okay.
Is it? I just want to make sure I'm correct on that. We couldn't add anything at this point. I mean, we're finalizing the warning tonight.
You're finalizing the warning tonight, so there wouldn't be time for legal review. If absolutely necessary, you needed a special meeting, it's possible next week, but we are pretty much at the end.
Okay. Hi there. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. My name's Brett Gaskill. I live in the Junction. I'd like to thank the previous speaker for putting together those statistics which prove that there is no need for this process. The cost is one thing in terms of these fees, but what I have not heard brought up is as somebody earlier said, there are 8 inspectors in Burlington. How many is the city here planning on hiring? New people that everybody is going to be paying taxes on. It's all adding to the cost. It's all piling on the unaffordability of Vermont and Essex Junction. I'm this close to saying, the hell with this state and get the hell out. I can't, I'm fed up with it. The taxes, who knows what my taxes are gonna look like? My stepdaughter in South Hero is looking at a 37% tax increase. People don't seem to listen. I know the people in Montpelier do. Please, do not do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that wants to share a comment on this or any other topic? Come on up. Watch your step. I know, it's
Quite the
a little
opposite,
crowded.
of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I spoke at the last meeting.
Could you?
Deb Billadew.
Thank you.
I live in Essex Junction. Thank you. I just know I heard. Anyways, I'm a 40-year resident of the village, city, 5 years in the town, 40-year landlord in Burlington, Essex, Franklin County, Lamoille County. So I have a lot of experience in property management. And I know a lot of people that own property and are property managers. I don't see the need for this program in Essex Junction. I think I mentioned the last time I was here, we have a pretty good housing stock in Essex Junction, and a lot of it is probably 35 years or newer. If I look at Countryside, I think there's 250 houses up there. You have Fairview, you have the new Thatcher Lane or whatever is over there. I think our oldest community is probably the Indian Acres, and those are pretty small houses, so they're probably not multi-unit buildings, I'm guessing. So, I won't dwell on the $110. What I will dwell on, and someone just brought it up, is we're looking at, I think, a 20% tax increase in our school budgets. Who do you think is going to pay for that? Do you think the landlords are going to absorb that? No, that also gets passed on to the tenants. And, we're a very senior community in the state of Vermont, maybe the second elderliest state in the nation right now. Why would we do this to our seniors? I think if you have a problem, or if someone raises their hand and there's a problem in their apartment or with their landlord, take it up with that person. Living in the village for 40 plus years now, I'm pretty familiar with what we're looking at here. I don't see a lot of dilapidated old buildings. I heard someone mention Winooski. We're not Winooski. Someone mentioned Burlington. I've been in Burlington 40 years. I know what's in Burlington, and we are not Burlington. But it appears that all of a sudden, as a new city, we're adopting programs from Burlington. I'd like to think that we're a little better than that. And that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else?
I would just like to know later on, when this comes back around, is that when people can ask questions of the board?
Yes.
Perfect.
All right, I'm not seeing anyone online, so we will move on.
So somebody is.
Oh.
Yeah. Anthony.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Anthony, if you give us your last name, we'd be happy to take your comment.
My last name is Ferretti.
Just turn up the sound on the TV, I think.
1 second, Anthony, we're trying to get this to work for you. Oh, what's up?
Hello?
Sorry.
What's it say on the chat?
It's showing him unmuted.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
His mic's not moving.
Yeah, his mic is unmuted.
But not showing any sound. Give this a minute for him.
Um,
It just indicated that he was talking.
He's really low.
So people out there can hear him.
Bear with us, Anthony.
Yep.
I'll be right with you.
Amber or Jess, could you, either of you, say something? Just so we can tell.
Hello? Can you guys hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't hear them.
I can hear Amber in my ear.
That's creepy, Scott.
We hear her out here.
Well,
It's not working.
Sure, we have no audio. Stick an engineer on it right now.
Thank you.
Correct. They can hear us, we can hear them.
If anybody else in the room wants to speak, and then
yeah, is there anyone here that has anything else they'd like to say while we're waiting? No? All right. Bear with us. We'll try to figure this out quickly.
Amber's on, I can hear them, they can hear. This thing is on. Yeah.
Possibly.
There we go.
yay! There we go.
There you go.
Thanks, dude.
I'm Joan Ponsky. I can't see myself here, but
Joan?
anyway.
Joan, just a moment. We're going to have Anthony share their thoughts with us first. We called on Anthony, so just 1 second. Anthony, can you give it a shot?
Yes, hello.
All right. Can you share your last name and where you're from?
Sure. From Essex Junction, my name is Anthony Ferretti.
Thanks.
Yeah. I appreciate all the landlords and property owners presenting their perspective. I'm a renter here, as a few other people were. And I'm also a young resident of the town. I moved my family here a few years ago, hoping to escape this type of regulation. I've got a prepared statement here because I recently learned about this proposal. So if everyone would just bear with me, I apologize that it will sound like a college classroom for a second. But
Okay.
but yeah, here we go. In 2021, the City Council of Orange City, Iowa, passed an eerily similar housing inspection program that called for mandatory inspections at the cadence of 5 years of all apartments and houses that are occupied on a rental basis. Inspectors were allowed to enter the most intimate confines of tenants' homes, including bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchens, and closets, in search of housing code violations. With this unfettered access, inspectors can pry into a person's personal property and personal life, purposely or inadvertently gathering information about the occupant's sex life, their orientation, medical conditions, religious or political beliefs. A group of landlords and tenants sued the city to put a stop to such inspections, citing the violation of not only the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, but the Constitution of the state of Iowa as well. The judge presiding over the case rejected the city's motion to dismiss the case, noting that the state Supreme Court had held that unreasonable searches not only apply to criminal cases, but civil actions as well. In a ruling this past August, the Iowa District Court for Sioux County ruled that Orange City, Iowa, the law requiring mandatory inspections of rental property within the city limits violates the Constitution. In fact, the U.S. Supreme Court has found that mandatory inspections lacking the permission of the apartment resident and conducted without a warrant were a violation of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. For reference on this issue, see Frank v. Marland and Camara v. Municipal Court of San Francisco. In both cases, the rights of the individual were upheld. Article 11 of the Vermont State Constitution also regulates such searches. It states that people have a right to hold themselves, their homes, papers, and possessions free from search, and that warrants for such searches, without sufficient evidence for them, should not be granted. Meaning that if the government wanted to inspect the unit, a warrant could only be obtained after sufficient evidence of a real need was presented and substantiated. Additionally, the U.S. Constitution's Fourth Amendment protection from unreasonable searches applies to searches in hotel and motel rooms as well. It is only after a person's stay has expired that, with consent of authorized hotel employees, government personnel may enter a room without a warrant. Should law-abiding renters not be afforded the same protections as those on vacation? I asked renters, do you want a stranger, a representative of the state, entering your bedroom and looking in your closets, potentially making a physical or mental itemized list of what they find there, whether it is related to code violations or not? Would you want them entering your child's bedrooms, thus knowing where they sleep in detail? I think that the human conducting the search would remember the contents of an individual apartment. To think that they would not remember the contents of an individual's apartment is naive. To think they would not report such findings to a given entity is a dewy-eyed fantasy. For those who are homeowners, of which I assume many in the room are, how would you feel if you were subjected to the same treatment? A state representative entering your home, your children's bedrooms, viewing the contents of your family's closets, remembering what was inside of them and what they hold. And this brings me to the issue of equality. I ask, why not include single-family homeowners in this proposal? Why not enter their homes, asking to view their most private areas? Are their edifices not governed by the same physics that govern the materials that are used to construct rental units? Would the residents of single-family homes not be subjected to the same harms of that of a renter if something in their private home were out of code? If single-family homeowners are excluded from this proposal, does this not create a stratified social situation within our community? The Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment would seem to agree, as the inspection proposal would deprive renters and rental owners of their fundamental right of privacy while shielding single-family homeowners from such scrutiny. Continuing on the topic of inequality, the fees associated with this program that will be put upon rental owners will invariably increase operating costs. These costs, rightfully so, will be passed on to the renter. Is there not a housing affordability crisis, a rental affordability crisis? Representatives from across the political spectrum seem to agree there is. So why embark on a policy that will quicken this crisis? Why create an additional barrier to entry for entrepreneurs looking to solve it by building more units, thereby decreasing unit cost? I have a great relationship with my landlord. They are available virtually around the clock should an issue arise. When I have been in need of something, they respond and address it almost immediately. No significant issues have been experienced in my time living here, which is the better part of a decade. All visitors have commented on my residence, how well maintained it is, clean and well appointed the apartment is, many of which live here themselves. Even if this inspection program holds the best of intentions, it appears to be manifested through the evidence-free analysis of a non-existent problem, as nothing to support its need has been presented. Given this, one can only conclude this is a tax on renters by another means. Rental housing inspection laws place an unnecessary financial hardship on owners, renters, infringe upon personal privacy rights, and single out apartment housing while excluding other properties. I ask that you abandon the pursuit of this policy and consider improving other proven approaches that target chronic code violations such as complaint-driven property inspections. And from a personal note, if this goes through, I will just move. I will leave and take my salary and all my spending and interaction with the community with it, because as a previous resident had mentioned, when is it going to be enough? There's enough money being taken out of our paychecks. There's enough money taken out of everything, tax increases, etc. This is just one more thing that's going to cost everybody. Some very dearly in the old pocketbook. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anthony. There was another person online that wanted to speak. I didn't write your name down. Are you still with us?
Joan.
Yes, I am. My name is Joan Klonsky. I rent in Essex Junction.
Hi, Joan.
I think I am totally against what you want to do. I think it's a problem. I think you're trying to create a problem that doesn't exist. And I think you're just looking to find a way to get additional funds for something that doesn't exist. So I would hope that you will eliminate this. And if I'm in a rental, if I have a problem, they are there immediately. So, I don't know what I don't feel what you're doing is right. And I think you're just looking for additional revenue. Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. Is there anyone else online that wants to share a comment tonight? I'm not seeing any hands up.
Steve just raised his hand, Rush.
Hey, Steve Eustace.
Hello.
Hi, Steve.
Thanks, Raj. Steve Eustace, I live in Essex Junction, and I also have a rental. And I had asked him questions last time around, and it was great to see Chris's report. And, I thought he did a good job doing the best he could answering the questions. I had my concern, I think a lot of people share the concerns that everyone wants a safe place to live, and it's make sure everyone has a safe place, and it's just a matter of how we all go about that. And like for me, of course, I want to have a safer tenant and all of that. And my concern is always like getting nitpicked. And I had, had a brief discussion with Chris, and it's like, because he had the link in there on here's the things we're going to check. And I was like, okay, these are all very reasonable things. I can like deal with this. It's a known quantity. But then, as Chris pointed out, there's like, oh, well, this references something else, which references something else. And, how do you get into this whole thing where, again, the railing is an inch too short on your stairs, or like, things that just feels like aren't as big, like egress or smoke alarms or things like that, which are like completely obvious and you need to do. And I was thinking furthermore about some of like the basic safety things, like having egress, like I think one of the people mentioned earlier. I mean, what if, like the first time you were renting, you just had to have like someone look it over? And all these apartment buildings they're building, they're all going through the planning commission or the development review board, and we know they're all safe and there's emergency exits and all these kinds of basic things that are going to happen. And is that the problem, that somebody has a really old home and they're going to rent out or the basement or something, and then it's not really safe? And is that really the problem you're trying to solve? And beyond the handful of complaints, again, that were brought up and Chris had in his report. So I'm just trying to think of what is the intent of what you're trying to do, and try and maybe there's a different way of doing it. Just because other communities have had a rental registry doesn't mean we have to do it the exact same way. Like think about it some more and say, okay, what are we really trying to accomplish here? And, first of all, how big is the problem, right? And so we have a little bit of sense of that now from 1 year's of data from Chris. And, how do we deal with this that isn't onerous or doesn't build over time, or we get into, again, a nitpicking situation? Or as the previous person mentioned, privacy issues and, all kinds of things. But again, I think people understand the goal of safety, and it's about how do we all ensure that? And 95% of the people are probably already doing this and reaching out and getting the information they need and doing the best they can as landlords in a very safe way. And anyway, so that's what I wanted to bring up. Again, concept's good, but maybe there's a different way to solve the problem, which isn't so onerous. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else online? Back to Zoom. All right, not seeing anybody in the room, not seeing anybody online. We are going to move off of public to be heard at this point and move on to the public hearing on the FY25 proposed general fund operating capital budgets. And I could use a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll move we open the public hearing on the budget.
Second.
Great. All those in favor say aye.
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 Excellent. All right, so this is a public hearing on the proposed next year's budget. Tonight is the last chance to comment on the budget. During this time, we're going to walk folks through a general look at the budget. take questions, comments on it. Once that portion is done and we've heard all the feedback that is available, we will close the public hearing and then consider any of that feedback and any potential changes or whatever's been brought up at that point. So we're going to start the presentation now. Are you controlling your control?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we move on?
Yes, please. So the budget process began with the city manager, finance director, and department heads in the city working together to produce a draft for the city council. We received that presentation from the manager and all of department heads in a day-long budget meeting in December, early December. We discussed some of what we heard that day and then spent the next couple of months digesting that, returning to the budget topic, seeking feedback, and we spent quite a bit of time making cuts here and there throughout the budget, trying to reduce the amount. We have had a public hearing already. We had a community meal at the CVE in January. This is the second public hearing we're having on the budget. There were no comments at that public hearing that caused us to change anything in the budget. So this is largely the same document that we presented then. We are, as I said, going to discuss this evening, and we'll warn it for the April vote tonight, barring any major changes or anything that we hear from the public. The budget's $12.1 million, which is an increase of 6%. Right now, our average property in the city is around $280,000, and the increase on the municipal property tax for a home of that value will be $170. Obviously, this does not include the school increase. The general fund tax rate will move from 0.9199 to 0.9807, a 6.6% change. And again, the impact of that will be $170. Revenue is largely from property taxes, and 74% of that comes from residential property tax. Global Foundries contributes 6% of all the property tax revenue, and businesses account for 11%. The remaining revenue, looks like 9%, comes from fees collected for community development or city clerk type fees. The largest portion of this budget at 25%, or a little over $3 million, is for public safety, which is Essex Rescue and the police department contract we have with the town. After that, public works and streets is about 13%. Recreation, the administration budget for recreation to run the programs is 9% at $1.13 million, and the Brownell Library at 8% at a little over $1 million. This slide, just takes you through the rest of that breakdown. I'll just stop here for a second. Are there any questions so far? Yes.
Is there a way that I can get that PowerPoint so that I can actually read what it says?
We can make that available after the meeting tonight, sure, on our website.
Thank you.
Is it in the pack?
It is not in the packet. It may already be on the website. We'll get you an answer this evening, though.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I just can't remember if it is. Walk you through summary of the big changes, the big players in the budget. We've already heard this tonight. One of the biggest impacts was a 15.5% health insurance increase for our employees. That, along with salaries, accounted for $368,854 increase. We are moving a finance billing coordinator position that was part-time to full-time. Half of that increase will be covered by enterprise funds. And those enterprise funds are things like the funds that bring in fees, so water, sanitation, and sewer. So when you see your water bill, that person will be handling a lot of that work. There's a $10,000 increase, a little over $10,000 for more community outreach. Part of the reason we've had more response, I think, on the rental registry, for instance, is because we took the time to mail out a postcard to all households in the community to let them know what we're working on. That's the kind of thing this would go to. So anytime we're talking about something significant that we think we need input on, this is what we would, that's the kind of work we do to make sure folks are aware of what's going on, not having to proactively go to the website to look on their own. We have been running through a strategic planning process for the past 4 or 5 months, and we expect that to wrap up in the next 6 or 8 weeks. We've added $10,000 to one of the legislative budget so that we can begin to implement and explore how we implement some of that feedback from the community. Clerk revenue came in lower, $31,000 lower than we expected. So we've reduced that revenue line for the clerk's office. Technology subscriptions in that department increased by about $11,000. And we have fewer elections this cycle, so that brings that election cost down. One city clerk position will move from 40 hours to 32 hours, and we believe we can save with that and still keep the clerk's services and office open 40 hours per week. Casualty insurance, property liability insurance increased citywide by almost 11%, and we've had an increase in the IT budget, IT contracted managed service agreement with Open Approach of about $75,000. We all just talked about the rental registry. The line item in that department for expense went up. It will be offset by the proposed fee collection. So that expense and revenue cancel each other out should that program continue. Economic development, there was a reduction of $36,000. We're pausing allocating money to the Economic Development Fund as we analyze and review what we learned in the strategic planning process. So there's a $36,000 reduction in the budget there. There's a $22,000 allocation in the stormwater budget for a consultant to help us explore a stormwater utility, which would be much like the water utility. Matching grant funds expense, we've increased that line by about $23,000 to leverage grants from the state. We contract with the town of Essex for assessing. They have changed their budget and asked us for an increase of $11,000 for GIS work, so that contract has increased. Our buildings budget has gone down by $40,000. We took some cleaning and supply costs from the Park Street School building and put them in the Essex Junction Rec and Parks program fund. And that program fund is a fund that collects fees for the services that are provided in that building. So we've saved $40,000 from the general fund, which is what we're all taxed on, and moved them to the fund that collects the revenues for that program, which is largely preschool. Increased the transfer to the capital budget by $53,000. And we've met a request by the fire department and done something we've long wanted to do, which was pay firefighters for their training time, not just their call time. So that has added $75,000 to the fire department budget. Are there any questions so far? All right, this is a summary of the top 10 current capital projects that we're looking at for the next 5 years. This is in no particular order. These projects have been scored against a rubric by the Capital Committee. Funding has been, for the most part, has been assigned in a preliminary way. Again, this is in no particular order, and these could come up as funding is available from them from various grants or state fund matches. We recently, the city recently implemented a local option tax, which is the 1% sales tax addition. recently the city council approved a policy, which was the intention of the local option tax, to earmark all of those funds to capital projects and not use them for other spending, to help offset the capital needs that we have over the next 5 to 15 years. 25% of that money will be specifically applied to sidewalk improvements and repairs. And this is somewhere in the order of about $850,000 a year total that we've seen come in. The policy, oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
We can keep going. That policy also, should something come up in the city that needs immediate attention, the policy also allows us to change that allocation if we need to. So we have, in addition to tonight, more opportunities to ask questions and learn more about the budget. There are 2 coffee chats with various city councilors on March 19th and 28th. There is going to be a live and recorded show with, I believe, myself and our manager, Regina Mahoney, on Channel 17 on March 21st. Our informational meeting will be April 1st virtually. We'll do that on Zoom as we've had done for the past couple of years. And annual meeting will be by Australian ballot on April 9th. Ballots will be mailed. We also have in-person voting at Champlain Valley Exposition, the Blue Pavilion building. So that's really it. You can find more information on the city's website. You can email citycouncil@essexjunction.org if you have specific questions later. But if anyone has questions now, any part of that or anything we might not have covered, this would be a great time to hear those. Yes.
I just had a question on back on the community development piece that you talked about.
Yes.
On this fee program. What was the dollar amount on that? Do you mix?
I can look for that. The entire community development budget or the increase?
Yeah,
the increase,
offset
decrease,
by
the
the
offset.
fees.
We can find that. That's going to take a second.
Okay. While we're finding that, are there any other questions?
Steve has his hand up, Raj, if you don't have any in the room.
Oh, I wasn't looking at Zoom. Thanks, Amber. Steve.
I just wanted to thank the council. I know we've had a variety of public meetings, the community meal, et cetera, gathered a lot of input, and it is difficult putting the budgets together. I know it's more than you wanted to have for the increase, but I feel like you've gone through a good public process to arrive at the data. And I know, sometimes social media and stuff, people don't always say the kindest things, but I want to make sure I complimented you on everything you've done on this. And I did have one question. On the capital projects, I had seen it elsewhere, and then it was on what you had shown as well, where it had the Pearl Street from West Street extension to Susie Wilson. It mentioned, road and sidewalk. And, as some people have noted on Front Porch Forum, and, I drive that stretch regularly, it's been really falling apart. And I'm hoping that it was going to get paved this summer so that, people aren't blowing out their tires on that, and that it wasn't going to take 2 or 3 years before we fix that, because it's been getting worse each year. And I have no idea what the schedule is on that, but I was concerned that I saw it in the capital budget, because I know that takes longer for things to happen. And it seemed more of a open wound that needed attention. So I just wanted to inquire on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure where, that list was in no particular order. I couldn't comment without accessing which we might have at our fingertips in a minute, actual schedule or how those are ranked at this point. But that list was, that kind of project wouldn't happen were it not on that list. So take heart, it's on the list.
Okay.
Do we have the community development number yet?
So the general road paving budget that happens every year, it's approximately 300,000 in the streets budget, is not in the capital
Oh,
program.
right.
So the capital program projects are really the bigger projects where we're doing some infrastructure upgrades and then pave on top of that when that work is done.
Also, Pearl Street. I think the section of Pearl Street that Steve is mentioning is a class 1 section. So the paving is done, paid for by the state.
Because you're talking West Street to Susie Wilson, right? We didn't take that on? Responsibility for that, or no?
We do maintain it, we don't pave it.
Okay, all right,
That's the relationship on the class 1.
okay.
Okay.
So we would have to add.
Perhaps
in
it's
there.
getting,
Okay. Gotcha.
so perhaps the current, just the paving itself that is in very bad repair at the moment could get taken care of completely outside of whatever improvements that are in the capital plan regarding the sidewalk.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I've learned something too. Do we have the community development number?
So as contemplated in the budget, the rental registry and inspection program is roughly $153,000. So again, that amount is offset by the fees to cover the program, but that's approximately how much it is.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Great.
It does, thank you.
Okay.
Now I have a question, because I think originally there was set to be about $250,000 in income based upon how many rental units are.
I'm gonna start asking. He was close enough to the mic, but if you're gonna, sorry, because we have people at home. If you could come up to the table. I know. It's pain.
So, Sean, Andy, based on the previous numbers of rental units in the city of Essex, I believe I understood that you were standing to take in about $250,000 a year. So now I'm hearing it's 150 to run the program, so 100,000 less than what you would be charging.
I don't believe it's supposed to exceed now, but I don't have the budget in front of me.
There's also, so there's an expectation. So we're making conservative estimates of revenue based on about a 70% collection rate for the first year, even though anybody that isn't registered at the start would be still liable for paying afterwards.
That doesn't really answer my question.
I think the salient point, if I may,
Yeah.
is that what the fees bring in is what the program's going to cost. It's not a profit center. It's not going to build up additional savings that will be put elsewhere. Whatever it costs to run is what's going to be brought in by fees.
So if the program should cost about $150,000 and you have roughly 2,500 rental units in the city, then that's significantly less than $120 per unit.
It's not that many units. It's closer to 18 to 2,000.
It's about 2,000.
Yeah.
Somebody pull out their phone and do the math on that real
So-
quick. 2,000 times 120.
The other salient point here too is that this is still under discussion and we're still in the process of exploring this. We had a public hearing to gather feedback. This process could go on for some time or we could drop it at any point. But right now it's still very much a process and an exploration on our part to see what's going to be included, how much it's going to cost, what the budget's going to be. But we also have we have to be conservative about compliance on it as well, as Chris pointed out. So there's a lot of moving parts and we're still in the middle of discussion on it.
But if I'm not mistaken, tonight is the night you're going to make that decision.
On the rental registry feature?
Correct.
No,
No.
no, not necessarily.
Interesting.
I don't.
One thing about that.
I mean, it's in the budget because it's essentially net neutral. So if it stays in the budget, it doesn't cost anything on the property tax. And if it doesn't happen, it goes away.
Right.
Part of the discussion later this evening will be, is it going to stay in the budget? And then that will happen, I think, after we talk about the rental registry. So I think, I'll speak for myself, but I think a few of the other counselors, we still have a lot of questions about it. I don't feel personally like I'm ready to pull the trigger on it, one way or the other. Nor, I think, have we warned that we're going to make a decision on it tonight. So this is not the last time we'll talk about the rental registry.
We'll circle back.
Okay.
The only
Andrew,
thing,
sure.
the only thing I just wanted to say, one of the things that can be confusing on the agenda when it says discussion and consideration, if there's the slightest chance we might make a decision on it, we have to say and consideration. That doesn't mean we are going to, but if we don't have that wording in there, then we can't make a decision on it. So if it says discussion and consideration for however many months it takes, it's because there's a chance we might, but it's not a guarantee and it's not a promise. So it's one of those frustrating open meeting law things that we have to do that can kind of mislead the public since it's misleading.
We'll have a better sense after we talk about it, and so will you, as to where we are. And like I said, I don't expect that anything will be decided tonight. Are there any other questions about the budget specifically?
Was there new positions in there? What's that about?
I'm sorry, could you come back up? I apologize, but it's the new hybrid world. And if you don't mind stating your name.
I'll say my name again.
Yeah, sorry.
It's Rolinda Carl, in case you didn't get it the
Great,
first
thanks.
time. Are there new positions in there and that the budget is included in that were filled but not advertised? The other question is, you said they went from 40 hours to 32 hours. Is that still considered full-time with full-time benefits, at how much percentage of medical? Is it 97%? Are they getting 100% vision coverage? Is it dental? Or is it based on 32 hours benefits?
So,
Answer that.
the 32-hour position is still a full-time position. Most of the benefits are based on full-time. There are various things that get adjusted, like I believe the retirement gets adjusted based on that.
Pay in on that. How about for instance, where some people work, if you go to part-time and you're getting, if you work X 40 hours a week, you're going to earn 3 hours a week, sick time and vacation or whatever. But if you go down, it's adjusted to that. How about that time? Or is it you just dropped to 8 hours, but you're still, the position is still benefiting it's still reaping all the benefits of a 40-hour position is what my question is.
That's a good question in terms of the accruals. I'd have to look at the personnel policy. I don't know that answer right off the top of my
I'd like
head.
to find that out. And how much is a percentage of the medical that actually goes on, that is part of the benefit? Are they paying 50% of their medical and then the city's paying the other 50? Or are they paying 3% of their medical? I'd like to, as far as, let's see if it's on the same, because honestly, for what the scale is that the city has for jobs out there, first of all, I try to stay right on top of what's you have out there, but I think I missed a few jobs or they haven't posted yet. What's the one about was there one for a director?
So let's answer your question first about percentages.
So currently staff pay 3% of their health insurance.
3%?
This proposed budget has 6% healthcare premium for employees to pay. That gets worked out through various contracts and negotiations. And we're in the process of doing that right now. Any positions that we just talked about in this proposal right now don't exist until July 1, 2025, because this is the budget that we're talking about for next fiscal year.
So you haven't interviewed or put them out there?
The position that is the only position that we're changing is going from a part-time position to a full-time position. That part-time position, I believe, because it's been vacant for a while, is actually posted right now. But
And is that the one the administrator's paying $84,000 a year?
sorry, gotta find this. Yeah, so it's a billing coordinator position. And it's posted now as part-time, and it's, depending on this budget, and if it gets approved, it could potentially go to full-time, starting July 1.
What's it paying again at part-time?
The range is between $20.05 to $21.30.
And full-time's gonna go to
It'll be the same pay rate.
pay grade. You said pay grade or hourly pay? Were you talking to 21 to?
Hourly rate of pay. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I've got this right. So with the new budget that you're putting through, people are only paying 3% of their health insurance premiums out of their paycheck. They're going to go to a whopping 6%.
Today, in this fiscal year, the staff pay 3% of their pay towards the health insurance premiums.
Yeah.
The exact way that gets worked out is through contract negotiations. This proposed budget is going to 6%.
There's some places there that can be some cuts. I mean, if we join the real world, we pay a lot more than 3% or 6% of ours. So you got to consider that, because health insurance is killing everybody. There's a suggestion.
We hear that suggestion loud and clear. Is there anyone else with a question or comment on anything having to do with next year's FY25 budget? Online, I don't see anyone online with a hand raised.
Excuse me, what are we focusing on now? We're jumping around.
We're focusing on the FY25 budget, the budget you're going to vote on in April. Yep. It does feel like we're jumping around. We've talked about several aspects of it. But. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anyone online. Not seeing anyone in the room. So I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing on the FY25 budget.
So moved.
Second.
Great. All those in favor say aye.
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 Great. All right. So we are moving on to. We moved the rental registry.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So you've got your memo in the packet with the questions answered that have come up thus far on the rental registry program.
Folks, can you please keep your comments a little quieter, please? We're trying to hear each other up here.
So as folks asked for, we looked at the data. So just so folks understand, the previous the long-term health officer for the city, or village, I should say, did not have digital reports. So we cannot find those in terms of figuring out precisely what that information looks like in terms of rental housing code information. Since we've had that switch over to health officers, and we're requesting monthly reports on those, that's why we've got 1 month of data, and that is summarized in the memo that you've got there.
1 year.
1 year of data. What did I say?
1 month.
1 year. Thank you.
Chris, beat me to it.
So I don't know for you folks how much you want us to go through this memo, or Chris to go through this memo, or if you have any further questions that you have in addition to what's in here. Also, this references the memo from Chief Gaborio, the fire department, and with some initial thoughts of what it would look like if this program is in the fire department as opposed to in the community development department. Chief is here. If you've got any questions for him as well.
I think it'd be great to start with Chief Gaborio, because that's the biggest change to the conversation at this point. So, Chris, if you don't mind coming up to this, just the table right in front of you there. We moved it. So we've got your memo. I think we all read it, and I'm curious if for everyone online and the folks in the room, if you could take us through the highlights of what you shared with us Originally, and so everyone knows, originally we had proposed this rental registry to be under the Community Development Department, and it would also handle some ordinance enforcement. Sometimes these things go together. There were a number of reasons for this. We've had tremendous feedback over the past, all the 5 years that I've been on the board, and especially post-separation, that we really need to get to ordinance enforcement. With the focus on merger and then separation, that was taking a backseat. We also had big transitions in our health officer, our longtime health officer, which is essentially a volunteer position with the stipend, retired. We now have someone stable. It's an employee with who actually works for rec. We have the same model that the town uses. One of their planning, I believe it, planning office employees also acts as their health inspector. We, for various reasons, were interested in a rental registry, and to keep it general fund neutral, cost neutral in the sense of the overall property tax, and to not add too many FTEs to the budget, envision that program as being self-sustaining because in a lot of ways it went together. Planning Commission spent a year looking at this in addition to their other work, and talked to other communities, did research. There was a UVM graduate student group that assisted them with some of that. And the program was initially, as I said, envisioned under the Community Development Department. Recently, the state has moved a lot of that enforcement and inspection to the fire service on a state level. And I'm probably misidentifying some of these terms, so Chief, correct me, but, the fire department has basically come forward and said, you know, it makes a lot of sense for us to actually run this. So we asked our fire chief, Chris Caborio, to share with us what that would look like. How would a program like that run under the fire service for EJFD? What would be the benefits? And so that's what we're doing right now. There is a memo. It's on our packet online if you want to read what he wrote. But Chief, if you can take us through the highlights.
Sure. I mean, the very big thing is, again, we're responding to these buildings every day. Probably some of the most important buildings that would be addressed here are some of the rental properties. Again, thinking more along the lines of the smaller properties, the individual homes, some of the ones that as we're driving down Main Street, you can just tell you've got large parking lots. We've got large structures that probably have 3 or 4 apartments located on the inside. We don't have any knowledge of how many apartments are in there, how many people are there during the day, how to access buildings like that. So in an emergency, that's the kind of information that we would find extremely valuable. We track a lot of this information. We have a database at the fire department. We have one software program that basically tracks all of our business. So we have all of our incidents are put into there. Our personnel records are in there. Our training records are in there. There's also a section for property. We have a lot of the properties loaded in there now. So again, this would just give us more data to be put in there, more data for us to have available when we respond to these locations.
And you would need to, how would the staffing work?
I mean, staffing would work, again, if you had a full-time equivalent, if you had a full-time person Monday through Friday, my priority would be to see if we could fill that position from within our department. That would give us one full-time individual that would also be there. I mean, again, priority would be to inspect, but you'd also have an individual that would be there Monday through Friday during the day. As presented a couple weeks ago, those are our peak times for calls, and it would assure that we, most of the time, would have an additional resource available to assist in those calls.
What do you and your firefighters see in the city for rental stock? What have you seen out there? What's the status right now of What's the big picture?
Big picture for most parts, again, some of our larger buildings are well maintained. Some of the smaller rental properties are, we have had issues. In fact, we went to alarms just last week, again, where we pulled down CO alarms, smoke alarms that were outdated. You know, when they're outdated, you know, they're not going to function properly. And when people can't sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, neither can we, because we get dispatched to them, and that's what we find.
And that's not necessarily the sort of thing a tenant would pick up on without prompting or.
No, exactly. I think most of the time people tend to push that test button, and as long as that alarm sounds, they think they're okay. It's a matter of taking that alarm off from the ceiling or wall and checking the data manufacturer. Those things will expire. Smoke alarms in 10 years, CO alarms in 5 years. And now the newer ones even have an end of life chirp. So it will chirp to let you know that it's expired. We get plenty of calls because my alarms are chirping, and we've replaced the batteries, but it's still chirping. And we can pretty much identify the problem before the first truck rolls out of the station.
Quick question, just rough math. I mean, with the number of calls you do in a year, can you give a general percentage of what you think might be rental versus non-rental?
I wouldn't even begin to guess that one, Marcus.
Would that be information that you would have?
We would, certainly.
Okay.
And some of the other things too is just, again, that basic knowledge of going to a building, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning, and being able to have the property owner and be able to have that information available so we can make the call. Again, that happened to us less than 2 weeks ago, where we had responded to a building. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. We can't get an alarm to reset, and nobody seems to have a number for the property owner. So
the registry part of this being,
yeah.
We have that kind of identified from the police chief as well, not having information on owners or owner contacts or property managers.
Correct.
In cases of crisis or emergency has been an issue.
And again, that's software. I mean, we have all that software available to us. All the rental registry inspection codes are all pulled down. I mean, Captain Smith was able to go into the software program and actually generate a check sheet. So the software is all available for us. Again, a lot of the property information is preloaded. It would be awfully nice to be able to supplement that information if we had a rental registry program.
And the types of things you're all looking for when you do these inspections are different than the annual elevator inspections and other inspections that we've heard or can layer on a landlord.
Correct. Those would all be performed by the state. So again, looking at across the street, you know, their alarm systems would have to be inspected annually, boiler systems annually, elevator systems annually. This would be separate from that.
So that I understand. So in that particular case, because you're saying the state administers that particular portion, if we were to go into, based on my understanding of the current draft, we would go into agreement with the state, therefore taking over the responsibility of this assignment. The state would still end up doing that particular portion of the inspection?
Yes.
Okay.
But they're inspecting different things.
Correct.
These are not duplicative test inspections.
Correct.
And even when elevator inspections occur annually, elevators still cease to function for periods of time.
Correct.
And the state has no minimum number of elevators required and types of elevators.
I'm not familiar with the elevator code.
But it's basically not what we're talking about here. So
Correct.
elevator inspections, sprinkler inspections, boiler inspections, not what we're talking about.
Correct.
Okay. So, good. Amber, sorry. Can't see that hand.
No problem. Chief, would this position also allow, I'm just gonna shift gears for a second here, also allow for the time of sale, public building inspections that are currently done by the Division of Fire Safety? Or is that a totally separate thing? You might not know the answer to.
And yeah, I would not know the answer to that.
Anyone else? Any questions for Chief?
I would like to understand a little bit more about kind of like in talking about what that inspection might look like, what are the things that you're going to touch on? Like how thorough will you need to go and inspect a property? Because I think there is, I don't know if there's an understanding or not understanding, because when we're talking about fire safety, I think we're talking about a certain list of things. But I think in the discussion too, we've also been talking about building codes. So, and I think of a building inspector being a little different than a fire safety inspector. So I just want to understand, or would the fire department be assuming both those roles, if I'm clear on this question, or you're just looking at fire safety pieces?
Just looking at the rental registry inspection that's put out by the state of Vermont. And I believe that's, we can get you a copy, it's available. I believe there's like 77 items that would have to be inspected.
So you've got this on the website, right?
I've looked it over, but so that I'm clear, because based on my reading of our rental registry, it sounded like there was also the potential for like building code enforcement. Is that not? Is that changing with the discussion if we move this to the fire department, or is that still the hope for this particular plan?
So you can chime in if you got this answer, but so essentially it's really looking at the rental housing code. There is a whole other step that some municipalities do that we are not proposing doing, whether it's going to the fire department or community development department, which is essentially, it's the easiest way to think about it is new construction inspection. And that is not what we're talking about doing here. We're just talking about ensuring that these rental apartments meet the requirements of the state rental housing code.
So the Vermont Residential Rental Housing Health and Safety Code also references other applicable codes that rental property and all public buildings are subject to already. That one of them is the Fire and Building Safety Code. So, the Residential Rental Housing Health and Safety Code talks a lot about things like mold and the heating and whatnot. But and then it also says that you have to meet the other code, which is where things like the smoke detectors and whatnot are under.
Okay. So is there any other questions for Chief Brown?
Can I ask a question?
Not quite yet, but thanks. Just we'll get to that. Anything? Nope. All right. Thank you. We're not quite at that portion yet. Is anything else folks wanted to talk about this program? We got Chris's answers to our questions from. This is basically the first time we've had a chance to talk about this since the public hearing. So we've got Chris's answers to the general questions and some of the questions that we've asked. So.
Is the intention to have more public comment and then?
Well, I'd like to have our conversation first, and then we can take questions and decide if we want to keep talking about it.
Do you have anything?
In terms of just why we're doing this, I guess just to start that process off. I know when we had first talked about this, Elaine, when you were on the board earlier of 2016, we had first brought this up as a possibility to really help change the paradigm shift that exists today around the health inspection system, the health officer system is a reactionary system. It is one where somebody needs to lodge a complaint in order for something to happen. The rental registry system is meant to flip that on its head, and instead is to be a proactive system, so that way someone doesn't have to call to then have there be some person of knowledge coming in to make sure that they're living in a safe place. So that was one of the intents. The other intent of that is also just the unwritten reality that in Vermont's rental system, a landlord can choose to not extend the lease if they don't want to, once the lease terms are up. One of the things that the Vermont Legal Aid has documented many instances of is when there are people who do complain, it so happens that there are times where those renters do not then get a lease extension. I'm not saying that to say that happens every time, because we know that that's not the truth, but it does happen. And so by changing the system from a reactionary system to a proactive system, we no longer have to require tenants to engage in what can be a conflictive relationship with their landlord, and instead can help to be more proactive to prevent these things from happening to begin with. A couple of things that I would like to see just within our ordinance, should we go through this, and I hope we do go forward with this. One is that we ensure that the fees that are assessed annually are revisited to make sure that that the city isn't creating a stockpile of cash. That this is not something that is used to lower the general fund, but frankly is purely to just cover the costs of the program. So that way those user fees for those who do participate in this program, so those rental units, are not charged more than they need to. So that way there can be some kind of, not necessarily true up, because I don't think we could then refund, but to make sure that we don't have that savings account for this. The other one is year after year, VHFA first started the concept around a statewide rental registry 15, 20, I'm trying to remember what Sarah Carpenter used to talk about, 20, 30 years ago, I don't remember now. Should the state do that? I think we should put within our ordinance that we will revisit this conversation about whether we want to maintain our own city rental registry, or whether we want to go with the state model. Just from the sense of, as we've heard earlier, why do we want to pay for something if somebody else is already doing it and we're going to be charged for it? So to make sure that we don't have duplicative services if they're not necessary. But as it stands now, there is not such a system that exists. The last thing I wanted to mention, the portion around individuals with Section 8 housing, just to be clear, when someone has Section 8, their rent is capped to 30% of their income. So if their rent goes up and their income does not go up, that does not necessarily mean that their rent will then increase, because it's based off of how much money they make. Just so we have that understanding.
And right now, the state has proposed, there are conversations around increasing the number of inspectors in the state level, but I don't think that it in no way, shape, or form means that they're going to do proactive inspections.
It's not a rental registry.
Right. Elaine.
So I first want to really acknowledge the incredible amount of hard work that Chris has done, that Regina has done, and our attorneys, and all of the effort that has gone into doing this work. It's been and you and all of us, it's been a very heavy lift to do this, to get as far as we've gotten so far. So I really want to acknowledge and thank everyone for that effort. I just have a few general remarks, and then just a few general remarks. In this whole process, particularly with tonight and the last hearing that we have heard from very few tenants. And we have heard a lot of anecdotes about issues with apartments, but we don't have the data to back it up. And now going forward, now that we have a new system and a new health officer and new processes in place, we will be collecting that data. And I think that is absolutely essential. We have heard that there are plenty of recourse options for tenants. And we are also hearing that the recourse options available are not responsive or are not available. So we're hearing a lot of conflicting information about what tenants are able to do in the event that they have issues with their apartment. or their unit. My personal concern is that there are tenants who are trapped between an unresponsive landlord and an unresponsive state system, whatever recourse options those are. And they're stuck in an apartment that is unsafe, and they are being ignored by all of their options, and they're afraid to complain because of retaliation from their landlord, including non-renewal of leases. So all of that said, I have also been part of municipal initiatives that needed to go back to the drawing board, as frustrating as that has been, and as publicly as embarrassing as that has been. And I also want to acknowledge that a rental registry has been a part of has been intended for years. It is in the 2016 version of our comprehensive plan, which was approved by voters. So a rental registry is going to happen. It's a matter of timing and degree and how we can get it done. So considering all of that and considering the financial impacts that we are expecting from the statewide education tax, which are unknown at this time, utility rate increases, the city budget increase, I think it's appropriate for us to continue working on this proposal and explore further how to accomplish its goals while minimizing its impact. So I agree with the idea of keeping it as a line item in the budget. But as you said, Raj, if we don't do anything, we're not touching that money and that revenue is not coming in. So I'm okay with keeping that in the budget, but I think we need to go back to the drawing board.
Amber, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Can you come back to me after?
Sure. I'm expecting that answer, Amber. I think, I largely agree, Elaine. I think, this is a complex issue. I watched a lot of South Burlington's process. I heard a lot of good ideas from testimony they took and from their process. If we're going to do this, I want us to be able to do what some other communities do, which is, provide something back besides just the inspection. Provide tenants with checklist, provide some kind of welcome to the community resource information, provide basically the handbook that I think CVOEO provides, but tailored to our community. I'd like to figure out how we handle those very rare but expected circumstances where a tenant has to be removed while an issue is resolved. I don't have anything in mind, but I imagine when you put something like this together, there's going to be an instance someday when some issue has to be resolved, and some communities, I want to say Barry, maybe another, require landlords to do that relocation. I wonder if we don't take a dollar from every one of these, create some kind of fund with $1 from every one of these registration fees and put it into a fund that either a landlord or a tenant can apply for to mitigate some of that. So if there is an issue with, and these are just ideas that we can consider along the way, but if there is an issue that's so egregious that a landlord will then be houseless, then there is assistance for both the property owner or the tenant to apply for those funds and be able to have some place to go while repairs are being made in whatever form. But I having watched and listened to some of the other conversations, I'd really like us to try to figure out how do we provide more to both parties with this than just the inspection. To your data comment, part of the impetus for this, a big part of the impetus for this and for every other community that's done this, is just the sheer vacuum of information. To Chief's point and police chief's point and to other people we've heard from, we just don't know what the apartments are. We are 42% apartments in the city right now. We expect to be much higher than that in the next 5 to 10 years, much higher. We could exceed the majority being apartments in the city at some point. Maybe. We don't have a grasp of what that impact is. We don't know where they are. We don't know the condition they're in. And that is, when you're planning out 10 to 20 years and you're trying to figure out what your needs will be, that's a huge vacuum of data. So I think if we can figure out a way to get the cost down and provide a little bit more back to both parties and figure out how to get that information without violating anyone's privacy, then I think we'll have something. But I think we do need to continue to figure that out. I don't think we need to rush into it. So that's just my input. I'd like to keep us focused on that, you know. So we've got the bare bones. We know what Planning Commission did. I'd also kind of like to hear one time, I guess, from the Planning Commission about this concept of, you know, some of these things, what have they talked about, what have they not talked about, but their feedback on the community development versus fire department front. And I think for no other reason as they spent a year on this. And I don't know that we have to have a joint meeting for that. Maybe they want to send the chair and a couple representatives over and we can have a conversation. But I think that there is good for both parties that can come from this. I think some communities have used that small $5. I think South Burlington's using $5 to create a fund for landlords who learn that they have a repair to make, but maybe not be able to afford it. So they can apply for that grant or that zero, you know, I don't know how they're funding it, but they're $5 from every one of their $150 fee they just approved last week goes to that fund. And that provides something back to the community that is getting built. There is no real way. I think, Chris, you spoke to this a couple meetings ago. I think the Planning Commission considered how do you look at not including new buildings and only including older buildings? How do you build differently? How do you change the rate? How do you change the amount? And I've seen various suggestions on this. But before you know it, a new building becomes an old building, or a new building becomes a building with issues. We've seen that with some of our newest buildings very recently and ever since they've gone up. So there really isn't a way to have some graduated system for billing. That would, I think, be predicated on the fact that you have endless additional buildings being built, and we will max out, I think, soon. So those are my thoughts. I think there's still more to explore, but we should probably provide staff with specific requests, so that we're back here not in 2 to 4 weeks in the same boat. So. Marcus.
Amber, do you want to go before me?
Are you ready?
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. No, Marcus, you can go before me. That's fine. I'll go after you.
Thanks. I do want to say that recently my biggest concern is the cost impact on renters, because of the fact that in my experience, I've been a renter. I have been a renter for many, many years before being a homeowner. I have had landlords that were great in this community, and I've had landlords that were terrible. Luckily, no, not in this community. But also looking at, again, the numbers that have been provided about where we are with the issue. And believe me, I've said this publicly before and about other topics. I would like to see government be proactive versus reactive, which they have a tendency to be. But in this particular case, based on where we're at right now, based on the fact that I still have, I think, some outstanding questions about its structure. One of the things that I've learned along the way too, and for this process and through the other aspects of, because again, my first year here on the council, I think one of the things that I would like to have seen was the Planning Commission come, when this was presented, to be here with that presentation to help with some of that initial conversation and maybe address some of these issues, because I think we are also asking questions of things that they have already gone down the road of. But that being said, I think there's still some outstanding questions, so I agree that another conversation that includes them in some form or fashion, I think would be great. My reaction at the moment is I believe we should let the fire department, we should go into agreement with the state and keep that inspection program local. But I'm not saying with the rental registry at the moment. I'm saying we manage the state program locally here in the city. Because we can do that for the next year, be a part of that process, get more information, collect more data, what we need to in order to understand this better, in order to stand up a program that I think we're hoping is more dynamic than just checking fire alarms. So I would like to be able to take that time. That being said, I right now would like to remove it from the budget, and the reason is because it's impacting the tax rate.
Okay, keep going. I want to know, but we're going to talk about the budget in a few minutes.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, I think, so that's how I'm looking at it right now, because I think we could use the time, and I understand this discussion has been going on for many years, but for us, it's only happened in the last few months. The planning commission's been on it longer, but I don't believe that we have had necessarily the conversation or really vetted this in great detail, because this is structurally, I think, a bigger thing than just whether or not we have an inspector on site or an inspector available to go hit every rental unit in the community. So I think there's things for us to explore before we consider this. Anyway, I will leave it at that, but I think for right now, I do not want to add more burden, financial burden to renters, because this will get passed down. And so for me right now, I'm in favor of continuing our conversation, because I'm not prepared to move this forward.
So your suggestion to bring in inspection without this program, is that a real suggestion? Or
Yes, based on what the chief has suggested they can do and take on, I think it's something that would not add an enormous burden just to take on the complaint-based system that the state is currently doing.
Oh, do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to answer? So that would be a significant FTE addition. They can't do it as currently staffed. It would be a hire of a full-time person for this budget we're talking about in your scenario.
Did you, Chief, and I'm sorry if I'm not
Come on up.
remembering your comment from before, but I seem to remember our initial ask about this.
I think a building code inspector is much higher level.
Yeah, but if we're talking about just standing up the complaint-based system that the state currently administers, if we take that on locally, then all we're doing is taking on any complaints. We're not doing proactive enforcement. That's what I'm saying.
We have that with the health officer.
And
right?
based on what I see from the state program and what I read from other communities, there are some communities that just administer it locally. They do not have a full rental registry. They just administer that program locally, so they stay in context. Because, as Elaine mentioned, and I've also heard, one of the disconnects, I think, is while the state program may be administering this program currently, we locally do not necessarily have that connection, that clear connection. So there's a disconnect when there's a problem locally. And so we hear about it if the state doesn't feel it, if they're not administering it fast enough. And so if we keep it local in our own hands, then we will be able to control. I think we'll be able to handle it better if we can keep it, but I don't know why we would need a FTE in order to manage a complete base.
Well, I'll let Regina jump in, but I thought you were talking about implementing the full inspection process that we've been talking about without.
No. I'm talking about this, just going into an MOU with the state to take the responsibility of that complaint-based system that they do.
So it's, I don't know if it's possible. We're in a little bit of a new world right now, because So what you're essentially describing is basically what existed prior to January of this year, because the Department of Health did this work with the local health officers.
Right.
And so the first point of contact, if a tenant had an issue, was to contact our local health officer. What's changed at the state level is the Division of Fire Safety has taken that over. Still complaint-based system, and they go, tenants go to them first and foremost. Then our health officer is involved through that process if need be. This is a relatively new way that this is happening because it just started in January. If we could, I don't know, and I don't know if either of you know the answer, if we could locally through an MOU be the first person on that complaint-based system back here again locally. And so I don't know that answer. We can find that out. And then two, if we were to do that, do we have the proper resources to make that happen? We'd have to, I think, collectively think through that.
There also may be other ways to not take it over, but be involved when they get it.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see their format for data sharing. I mean, part of what's in this code right now is that this data is public. And part of the benefit of a rental registry for tenants anyway is that they now or will have an opportunity, depending on how your program's set up, to actually find out what they're getting into before they sign a lease. It sort of changes that power dynamic from being the one to provide all of the access into your life with your credit report and everything else, but then gives the tenant an opportunity to review, in an ideal world, what the what the property history is like before they sign a lease. I'm not sure what you're trying to accomplish with what you're.
I'm trying to find a place where, again, if we're trying to gather more intelligence in understanding the problem, in order to understand the nature of what's happening in our community, and buy us some time to have further discussions on the rental registry. I'm just trying to see if there is a happy medium, and based on, again, looking at the state program, it looks like there are municipalities that don't have rental registries that are just in agreement with the state. Because if I go and file a report, there are municipalities that don't have rental registries that if I put in that I live in said community, the state pop-up says, this is the person you can contact in this municipality. So they're not even taking in the complaint. They're already saying, here's the person locally you need to talk to. That health officer, they list a number of contacts. And I'm wondering if we can't do something along those lines.
So I'll add to that request then. I'd like to know first, in addition, what data sharing already exists, because I don't want us to take on, we need to have a health officer, but then we're basically asking for work back that we're not being reimbursed for. Essentially. I mean, this program was supposed to be revenue neutral due to the load. So if we're going to assume we're going to do this work, I just want to know if how they're going to share data. So are we going to get that monthly? Can we ask for it on incident basis? Is it quarterly or just not available, which I have a hard time believing. But is there data available, and because it is new, like what's the process for keeping Matt informed, our health officer? Is there an avenue of is there a path of communication that's just default that hasn't really kicked in yet? Like they may just CC him on stuff and say, so you're aware. And maybe that's just a tweak they can make. I mean, if a community asks and says, this would be really valuable information for us to have. Because when we go for X issue, we think it's the first time. But if you've already talked to this person about other things, the cumulative effect of that property would be nice for us to know. You know what I mean? And if we're answering for, I don't know, I can't think of anything right now, one problem that we're sort of responsible for, and they're answering for another, and we don't put those together. I think that's probably a little bit of what you're getting at, right? Making sure we have the accurate data.
Yeah, but I feel like the experience is that the state, if we were in agreement with the state, then there would be no data to get from them. If what you're asking is, can we get the past data from what they already have, but it's a relatively new system, so I don't know how much they currently will have on hand, but I think it's a reasonable ask.
Yeah, we can find out. Amber, I saw some nodding. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. So again, I just want to thank you to everyone, including the Planning Commission, for all the work that's gone on for the past year plus. I have always been in the minority in this situation because I don't necessarily believe that the inspection piece is imperative. But I do think that there's a significant value in knowing the rental registry stock that we have. But I have learned a lot of information, and in addition to saying thank you to those folks that have already been thanked, I think the community that's come out, including landlords and tenants, to provide feedback to the program. And I've learned a lot of information from everyone in this, and look forward to continuing this discussion. But I am in a similar situation where I'm not ready to vote on this. I do have some additional questions, thoughts, concerns, and also agree with Marcus in that my position on the budgetary piece of this would be to remove the rental registry component from the budget, though I think Marcus mentioned this being a general fund impact. Again, it's net neutral, so I do think it's not impacting, but I do think that my position would be to remove it. Just to be clear that we're continuing to work on this, that there is no decision that we are going to move forward in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or 2 weeks for the public.
Okay, thank you. Just lost what I was gonna say. Oh, you said you had a number of questions. I've heard that a couple times. If you're ready for them, it would be a great time to share them, so that staff can bring us back answers.
I'll only speak for myself. I don't think I'm prepared to give a bunch of questions tonight. I do think Marcus's thoughts are interesting. I'd like to hear some of that. Part of it is I think I need to do a little bit more research, and I think that a lot of the conversation has been, a lot of the questions that I have been previously answered, and I don't want to ask them again. So things like comments about the 500 units and how we're addressing those, and is there a way around treating those differently, or the multiple inspections for Section 8 tenants, or subsidized housing and stuff. So I think from my own position, I don't think I have. That's my long way of saying I don't think I have anything tonight, Raj.
Okay. So right now we're basically asking for more information on how the interchange works with the state and what that looks like, both in terms of like what it would look like if we adopted it or took primary responsibility, it sounds like, and or what kind of data sharing is available. Even regardless of whether we take it over, I think we want to know that. Sounds like we want to get together with at least a couple representatives of the Planning Commission, and I guess this has been brought up before by Regina. Potentially either a joint meeting or just have representatives come by. And I think I'd be curious to know, and I think I'd like us to work on, what can we also be bringing to this, like I said earlier. So, in the next, while we're waiting for that information, the counselors can look around and say, how do we make this work? How is it just not an inspection and a fee collection? What resources are other communities providing for both parties as part of this? And I'd be curious if there was a creative way to adjust fees based on age of unit, but I have not seen one scheme that would work. Nor have any communities that I've seen adopted any, but I don't pretend to have seen them all. So yeah. So why don't we take public comment and then we can come back to talking about this. Matt, I'm going to start with you because I didn't want to call on you before because I wasn't calling on anybody. But Matt, who's standing up with the gray shirt, is also a captain in our fire department. Sorry. I'm sorry, Rick. Sorry. Yes. Sorry, Rick. You got Matt in the mind. Matt is our health officer, who's also his brother.
Yeah. A couple points on that, the health officer thing. That is in the budget, so that line item was supposed to cover it. And the fire department has already said we'll take over the health officer role if that is like removed. So that is one of the things. Jamie Schwab, who is the fire inspector in the region, whenever he does a building inspection, asks one of our firefighters, usually our Lieutenant Keith Rivers, to join him. So we're already going to most of the inspections that are occurring, and we're joining those inspections with the state when those happen. Another common way inspections happen is not through the residents, but through the fire department reporting it. We're probably the most common reporter of concerns with buildings that we come across in the community. So when we come across them, we also report like, hey, we think there's a life safety issue here. We believe there's some type of problem with this building, and we'll put that information and we'll send it up to the state and request an inspection. Usually when we request an inspection, it happens within about 15 days, is what we have found. It's a little bit different. It's an authority requesting it. And
Can't hear him.
it's a little bit different because it's an authority asking the state to do it. And I think there's a little bit of a different. Jamie also is a local firefighter and knows most of us, so he has personal relationships with a lot of us. So when we ask him, there's kind of that aspect of like, I'm getting asked by a friend to come help out. I think at times that does help out with that relationship that we have with the state. The state is the entity that trains all of us, so they see us consistently. Like they know Chief is the head of the Chittenden County Chiefs. So he knows all those connections throughout the area, and those relationships are what have been helping us through the conversation of what we've been providing as well.
That sounds great. Does Chris have the data that you have? So you're saying you're going out on, you're tagging along on these inspections so do we have that data too? Because I kind of feeling like we probably don't.
So what's funny is it comes back to us. So, and then we have it we have a property management tool.
Sorry.
If you would like a login to our property management tool, I could get you it. But then I would probably have to teach you how to use it because it took me about 2 years to figure
I guess my point is, right. My point is that's data we don't have for this, and I'm just learning that we might have data from inspections that have occurred. Correct. So let's have the fire department and staff connect about how to revise our data.
Okay.
From the last, give us a period. And because I don't think anybody here knew that was going on. Yeah. Or that our folks were involved. Sure. This is getting a little out of hand, but
sorry.
It's what happens when the Smiths come to the meeting.
I'm curious on a complaint-based call to the state versus a complaint-based call to the health officer. The health officer, because I know how the state operates generally, the health officer will generally go and deal with strictly that complaint. Do we know if it's a complaint to the state when the state comes in, if they only deal with that complaint, or is the property reviewed totally when the state does it? Normally the state will come in kind of like OSHA, right? Somebody gets hurt, OSHA inspects the whole building.
Yeah.
To find out what other problems were not there. Do you know that answer?
So we're 59 days into the state running this program under the Vermont Fire. And so with that, we have not had one of those yet. And so we have not heard of a case. We can request that and we can get that information for you. But we have not had so the process is online. It's a form you fill out. We have not seen, the state has not reported that they've done an inspection based off from that complaint process to us.
Wonder if that's translated and available for new Americans.
Yep. And it's only been 59 days that they've been running that program.
I'm betting no. Thanks.
Of course.
Well, impromptu.
Amber has her hand up.
Amber. Can't see it.
I was just gonna comment that based on my personal experience in which the state has done an inspection based on a complaint, they are going through the whole list.
They do.
So they are addressing the entire list,
Yep. So when
just based on my own experience.
every time we've joined, they've done NFPA 1, they've done NFPA 101, and they've done the registry if they were doing it at the time. All three of those are covered.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Sorry. I'm his staff, so
I understand. Appreciate it. Is there anyone in the room? We'll start with the room. Is there anyone in the room that has any questions or comments based on what we've talked about so far on the rental registry only? Sir, come on. If you don't mind coming to the. Oh, sorry, I didn't see the boot.
Me or somebody?
No, you go ahead. Please come up. Just make. Now I feel bad making you move.
I just had David Harrington again. I just had a question based on an earlier comment from, I believe it was Anthony. If this were to be in place, would a tenant have the right to refuse an inspection?
I don't think so, but we can look into that.
Okay, so doesn't that raise kind of a constitutional issue? Because it
doesn't appear to in Vermont yet. Because the state, I mean, I'm saying that only based on, we will look into it, but I think it doesn't in the sense that the state has already implemented this program. And I think if this, and the state,
But I wonder if it specifically addressed a tenant's refusal to allow an inspector to come in.
Without a complaint first?
Without a complaint first is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Because the Vermont Constitution actually affords greater protection in the area of search and seizure than the U.S. Constitution does. And so I'm just suggesting it might be a problem that you would run into if people were to try to seek legal remedy in this situation. For what it's worth.
I think it's worth checking. We've had legal review on this and we haven't had any of that feedback. So that's probably the best I can say.
Thank you.
Yes, please. I'm sorry. You're going to have to.
Bring up.
Oh.
I understood you right, that there was basically.
I'm sorry, could you say your name?
Rolinda again, if you don't know. But there was a comment I thought that I heard saying that basically it was all landlords here and no tenants. I'm sitting around a bunch of tenants. I just wanted to let you know that there's plenty of tenants here. Someone made that, maybe it was on paper.
I said that we have not heard from many tenants. I know there are tenants in the audience.
Oh, no, two of them got up.
Correct. We've heard from far more landlords than we have from tenants. That's all I'm saying.
You want to hear from a tenant?
Gratefully, yeah.
Come on up, that'd be great. Watch your step around the camera tripod, please. If you just share your name, where you're from.
Charlie Lancaster. I'm at the Village of Autumn Pond. Been a tenant and a resident of Essex Junction for about 8 years. We are a more modern facility, so we do meet code, and the facility itself does their own inspections. But I don't know what the rush is to get into this inspection business and what the board is looking to do. I haven't heard a list of complaints or reasons why, any positive reasons for getting into the process. And I don't know whether the board has considered that. It doesn't seem that the board is prepared to go the next step, and I think you have some work to do, which I think you recognize in organizing this. And I don't know what to suggest, but don't rush into being a real city. Things worked out fine as a town since I've been here for 8 years. If you look around the country, cities are in trouble. Towns are not so much. You have to consider that. Why is that?
Why is that?
I think from a town base, it's more collegial. People tend to work together. My impression is that if you come from a city, it's more cutthroat, more competitive. So take your time, do your homework, come with a proposal, identify the problems, lay out the statistics as some of the folks here have done. It was very helpful. So if you're going to advocate for a change, base that on evidence that you have. Yeah, and it looks like the fire department is a place to collect some of that. I'm not familiar that well with the town structure. You have a building inspector, inspections due for new buildings, or if people ask for building permits, does that prompt another investigation or review of the residents? So think about it. Take your time. There's no rush. We're not going anywhere as long as the community is healthy, and it appears that it is. So let's not jeopardize that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Eustace does have his hand up online.
Oh, there it is. Steve, you want to share something with us, Steve? Please join us.
Sure, thank you. So just a couple things I thought of, a rephrase from earlier on the topic. In terms of the fire chief mentioned, well, we're looking for 77 things, and then there's the question of the nested items, and perhaps you can structure things, as you work through this process of, this is exactly what we're going to have, check. And, it doesn't change until you all change it. Because like for me, I'm the type of person, and I'm sure I'm not unique, where I want to see the list of 77 items so that I'm going through them well ahead of time, so that by the time if somebody were to come over to the house to inspect, I know I'm going to pass. Like, to me, it's all about the uncertainty and all of that. And I don't want to, and I know somebody had mentioned earlier, like, oh yeah, we're not trying to do a building inspection program, like a code, building codes type of program. But like, we don't want to have a back door into something like that because of like the nesting of these things that can then say, oh, you do have to have that thing. And I know sometimes with building codes, some things are grandfathered and some aren't. It just becomes very difficult to understand. So when you come up with your program, it would be great. And maybe it's, two documents. One is the basic registry. And then another thing could be, and it references a different document that the city owns that has the 77 items or whatever the right number of things is that everyone agrees. And maybe you start with, sounds like there's that first thing to start with. And then, maybe that changes over time, maybe it doesn't. But everyone can see in plain sight what they need to accomplish. And because I think that's a lot of the things that I hear people worried about. Nobody intentionally wants to do anything wrong, but it sure is nice to see a list of exactly what's being looked for, so that you can be responsible and have it done ahead of time, right? Anyway, so that's just what I was thinking. I don't know if you got any questions on that or if that makes sense.
Thanks, Steve. I think the intention, of course, would be to, like right now, we have off the page listing what we've done so far and that this program is being looked at, a link to the code we're going to inspect against, we're proposing to inspect against. And I think, the interesting thing for me about what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but, for instance, my wife is in a very regulated business, and she files multiple licenses with OPR and State Secretary of State every year. Just did it, just talked about it. It was a thing. It sucks. But she's also required to know what's expected of her to operate under her license and operate under her business. So I hear exactly what you're saying, and we will absolutely make sure and that's kind of what I was getting at before. If we're going to do this, we want to make sure that everybody has everything up front and we're providing something more than just the inspection. Like, here's what we're going to do. Here's how it's going to work. Here's something for the tenant to know what's happening, and here's something so the landlord knows what's happening. So I agree completely. But I am also hearing something that's kind of funny. It's like, if you're operating a business that is literally the most important aspect of a person's life, where they live, and you have that much power and control over their life, then you really need to know what your responsibility is as a landlord. And I think when I'm asked why this is important to me, it's because there's that inherent power dynamic. And I've been a tenant half my life in great situations and terrible situations. And I've had to hand over enormous amounts of personal data recently to get my daughter an apartment as an adult. So there is a power dynamic. I've heard from plenty of landlords or tenants, and I can't produce those because they're all nervous because they have no place else to live, that they're not in a position to ask for an inspection for their apartment. So there are reasons we're doing this, but I completely hear what you're saying. I just wanted to share that did strike me as a little odd that, and I feel for you that it's so complex that you're worried that you're not going to know something you're supposed to do. So I think, definitely a goal for this program was make sure that everything is transparent, everything that's going to be looked at is upfront, and that both parties know, this is how it's going to operate. This is what the concern is. This is what the interest is, don't really care what your bathroom looks like as long as the hot water works, that kind of thing. It's going to be fairly rudimentary, but this is what we're looking at. So.
Exactly. And the first document that was pointed to in Chris's memo was very, very straightforward. And I went through every item like, wait, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yep. And it all looks fine. But then it's when you get into the nested nature that there's other things pointed to. That's where it kind of got tricky.
Yeah.
And that's where it would be really nice if, however you do it, it would be all in one spot and easy. And it sounds like that's what you're thinking.
Yeah, I think it would have to be. Yeah.
Because as we were shown in that, it wasn't, because you had to read this thing and then that thing and then the other thing. And so, anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Appreciate your viewpoint. I agree, safety is imperative, and we all have the same goal. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Is there anyone else in the room that wants to comment on this right now? You're welcome to. Sure, come on up.
Jason Struthers, Taft Street. So is there an exemption for owner occupied or short-term rentals?
Chris, can you describe how that's is proposed to work?
So short-term rentals would be treated the same as long-term rentals under the draft ordinance. Owner occupied, it depends. It's by the unit. So an owner occupied unit, if you are renting out a room within your house, but you want to share space, that under the draft ordinance would be exempt. But if you own a duplex and you live in one of those units, the unit that you live in would be exempt, but the unit that you're renting out would not be exempt.
So no. Okay. So I don't know of many instances where people get paid without doing any work. So how do you justify collecting fees every year and then only providing services once every 5 years?
The opportunity and the need for the inspector is based on the history and the performance of the property. So we're basing it on that. That's how it's being discussed right now. So
1 year of service and 5 years of fees.
People pay for insurance, they pay for licenses, they register their
but they get
businesses.
services every year for
Not necessarily.
every time. What other instances?
That's the example I gave earlier. I agree. I don't disagree with you on some of these things.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
my wife had the same argument with her medical license.
I mean, so how do you justify taxing tenants? I mean, this is a net zero program, but you're taxing tenants. So how do you justify that?
I think we've talked about that already.
It doesn't bother you at all?
We're not taxing anybody, we're charging a fee. for
You're charging fees, and you're not providing services, only
That's up
one
to
out of every 5 years.
And we've talked about that too.
1/5.
Move on.
That's a bad deal.
Okay.
Nobody likes it.
Okay.
It's a huge invasion of privacy. There was more than 2 tenants that spoke tonight about it, so it's not just landlords. So you're adamant about this registry, and you want to bring something other to the table other than fees and inspections. What is that? What are you going to bring to the table?
I think I talked about that earlier.
No, you didn't. You said you want to do something, but can you give us some examples? I mean, what can you do?
I think we just discussed the possibility.
Can you reiterate for me? Because maybe I'm a bit slow.
I think would be happy to
Oh.
do that, Jason. And I think it's worth remembering that we have said multiple times that we still aren't done.
Right.
So we have research to do.
So you don't know yet.
We understand that there are other towns that have set aside funds from the fees that they collect from renters, from landlords, that go towards grant pools or other funding sources for landlords to use to make repairs that they can't afford to make. So that's one option, and we'll explore others, but we don't know what they are yet because we
Okay.
have more questions to
Then
ask.
just say that,
and
we
more
don't know.
research to do. We did
Some of
say
the
that.
long-winded excuse.
We did say that.
Okay, well, I mean, the last comment I'll make is just don't HRA our city. That's what you guys are doing. And people don't like it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience here in person? Just going to check Zoom. Okay.
You don't know my name.
And because we know your name, but the person who is taking our minutes virtually.
Melinda Carl.
Thank you.
So I just want to make sure I'm getting exactly what everybody's saying here. So basically, you have no answer. The registry, if I understood, was it legal aid, you said, is not to make any money. It's supposed to take in what it's supposed to break even. So none of it's going to hit the general fund, did you say?
Correct.
So with the calculation of the apartments in the place, if it's 250,000, but you guys said 100, 150, whatever it was off quite a bit, a lot of money, more than I make. With that extra money, was that because you didn't have all your ducks in a row and you put it out there, or was it going to go elsewhere and it got changed tonight when that was brought up?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, because there was 2 different numbers. You know, you guys said 150, was it? And if you count the house, the apartments in the village, well, now city, it would have been 250,000 if it would have been $100,000 more. Where was that money going to go if this had slid right through?
Well, in that scenario, if there were extra money, it would stay in the fund that it's intended for. And as Andrew Brown pointed out a few minutes ago, one of the things we really want to look at is, so we've taken in more money than we have expenses for. How do we adjust those fees to make sure that goes down?
Okay, so
because right now, part of the purpose of the registry is to get a picture. We don't know.
Well, wouldn't it be
exactly? Hold on. We don't know exactly how many and where those apartments are. We are basing this off information from various sources. But again, we don't necessarily have folks telling us when they're renting out part of their house or their whole house. So we don't know. We've done some very good deduction, I think, and I think Chris can probably speak to this. I think the number that we're basing that budget on is about 70% accuracy. So
Okay.
we think we can identify and have, of those identified apartments, receive registrations from about 70% of what's actually out there. It's an estimate based
Okay.
on what we've had from CCRPC and some other sources, and what we've been able to gather from our grand list.
so it
So if we raise more money, it would stay there.
right?
And ideally, were no other changes made, like if we didn't take $1 per registration for grants for landlords, for instance. If it was strictly, we take in money,
Right.
we pay the employee.
Right.
That would, I would think, almost need to then be taken into account to then reduce the fees in the following year.
So
in a way that it reached as close to zero as it could.
Wouldn't you be better off if it gets that far? First of all, I will say this, and I've put it in print. We are the city. The city is the people. You guys have been elected in there in what your position. That doesn't mean that you're going to be there forever, okay? So it just says you're elected. You are speaking for the city. So what it sounds like is that you're not hearing us. So with that said, why don't you start off, you can, if it gets even that far, why don't you start off low, 50? And then if you don't make what you're looking for the next year, then reconsider it. Because you've got the fact
No,
as.
that's a good point.
Yes.
It's a good point, and we have to hire somebody to do this. This takes a person that has salary and benefits. And then if there's a difference, then we can cover it. We'd have to go to the general fund and raise taxes to backfill that until such time that we could raise them. But then there's the unpredictability for you. If we start 42% of where we should be, then let's say we start at $45, and that doesn't work after the first year, but we really needed 98, then we're coming to you for $43 more the very next year, and the feedback we'll get is, why do I have a 95% increase in my rental registry rate? Why didn't you know ahead of time? So it is I understand completely where you're coming.
You can't have it both ways is the problem. You guys want to go high, and then if you don't have all your ducks in a row, so you're throwing this out here. So the bottom line is, right now, the state does have it covered, and why don't you leave it alone? We didn't have a problem until we went into a city. The few people that had a problem must have taken it up with you. But I'll tell you one thing, I have yet to run into anybody in Essex that has complained about their landlords. So
I think our experiences are different, but
well, you lived elsewhere as far as, I've lived in Essex my whole life, and didn't you say you rented too? You were a renter?
I've been here I don't know that we need to litmus test how long everybody's been here, but I've been here for 20 years in Junction County in Vermont for 30 years.
Been since I was born, but I'm
Well,
just stating
that's
that
different.
I've owned property, been a landlord since I was 18. But the bottom line here is, it's not broke. Leave it alone and deal with the handful.
Okay.
And please listen to the people. Is the city, I just want to know this one question. Who runs the city? You guys or the people?
I think there's the perception that when we come and we speak at a meeting like this, that we're the only voices that are heard, and we hear you. We've absolutely hear you, and we're not moving forward with this because we have genuine concerns, many of them yours. How do we keep housing affordable? But what I want to say to your question is, you are absolutely a valid voice to be listening to, but you're not the only voice we're hearing from.
Everybody
And
here.
you're not the only voices we're hearing from either.
Where are the other ones?
You're no less important and you're no less valid, and we take all of that, I'm speaking for myself, take all of that very much to heart, which is why we're trying very hard not to rush through this, and we're taking our time to make sure that if this is something we want to do, that it is sustainable and it can work. But we're not voting in 2 minutes to move this along, and I think that says a lot.
Well, then I think you can take Jason's idea. We can be able to vote on it as a city. We have time now.
We're probably not going to be at a place where we can do that this year.
Well, we're in no rush to get there. I'm sorry, what was your name again, sir? The one you told? Charlie, don't rush on it.
Okay.
This is going to affect a lot of people. And the only thing, election is coming up, this year, next year, we're gonna, so what's the rush? Those few people that are contacting you?
I think I want to express that I agree with you.
Okay.
And I don't think that we're trying to rush. I think that we're moving on tonight and asking more questions. And everything, again, back to the intention of sending out the card to make sure everybody was aware of this. We're not going to do anything without making sure folks are aware that we're going to talk about this again.
That's the question I wanted to ask you. Is that somewhere along the state's guidelines that when it's something brand new that has to be mailed out initially? So where are you putting, other than, where do you have to list everything for people to see?
On our website. and in certain other, what's our?
Yeah, other places,
location?
because not everybody can go to a website.
It's Essex Reporter.
Uh-huh.
Just for regular agendas?
Yes.
For legal
no,
notices.
What's going on?
Oh, legal notices, Essex Reporter, website. We post it out here. We post it at the library. I think our third place now is we post it at EJRP.
That's the requirement.
Public wise, as
We
far
also
as we
tend
get
to
it.
post things on Front Porch Forum,
Right.
City of Essex Junction
Yeah.
Facebook page.
But those are where you have to, I'm just saying,
The first ones that Regina listed off were the state regulations.
that's one
That's
that I
where
wanted to
that's
know.
where we have
Yeah.
to do it.
Okay.
Yep.
And I wanted to know if that mailing was one of them.
Nope, that mailing is something we've wanted to do, that kind of community outreach and newsletter, making sure people are, involved and informed.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, other communities that have just done this, none of this. 4 people show up, 5 people show up. They did not go through that step.
Maybe
And so-
maybe they weren't running as good as we were.
So I just want to say that we're really trying to take seriously the fact that people want to have input in these decisions and they want to have input in these conversations. And this is by no means a done deal.
Well,
We'll stay tuned. We'll be
Yeah.
announcing when we talk about it again, and we welcome you all back to talk more about it.
It doesn't majority rule.
Okay, we're gonna move on right now because I think we're going over the same thing. Is there any other comments that we haven't heard already?
Sean Handy again.
there.
So I guess maybe I can ask one of these questions towards you. Have you come up with an idea of what the budget?
If you could address us over here, please. Thank you.
Does Chief know what the cost might be if it was given to him as the project to handle?
Right now, the goal is that it's the same as we proposed, but we haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay. So I heard a couple comments.
Let me revise that. We're going to try to make this lower if we can, but we haven't gotten that far yet in terms. I just want to rephrase that. If we can make it less expensive, we'd like to make it less expensive.
Okay. I heard a few comments tonight about saying, since like a Section 8 tenant, that this necessarily might not affect them, but I want to remind you that a lot of Section 8 tenants are already paying the maximum, or the state's paying the maximum amount of rent that they'll pay for that particular unit, meaning that the tenant's paying the maximum amount that they can pay. Now, if this does go through and a landlord has to raise that cost, that is going to cause that tenant to have to pay that difference because the state will not cover it. They're already paying that maximum amount that they will pay. There's that. I also heard another comment about landlords having power and control. I think most landlords you talk to would probably say it feels like it's the other way around. For instance, the retaliation thing retaliation is one of the things. So if there's a complaint made to a agency, health department, whatever it is, there's already laws written where if that landlord takes action against that tenant within 6 months, that's a retaliation. That tenant can then sue the landlord and pretty easily win. So there's as much power for the landlord as you might think there is. Chris, for instance, accompanied Sharon Kelly and Bob Stone to one of my properties after a tenant made a complaint about us when we put some storage containers in what he thought was his backyard. I understood why Sharon Kelly was there. I understood why Bob Stone was there. Now I understand why Chris was there. But I think Chris can attest to the fact that that didn't take very long from the time that tenant made that complaint to the time Bob Stone and Sharon was at my property. Wasn't very long, was it, Chris? Maybe a week. So there's already things in place for tenants that feel they have a grievance. Now, some of the other things I brought up in the previous meeting that I don't think ever got addressed. So say this does go through, whether it's Chris that's implementing it, you guys, whatever it is, you're going to come into situations where tenants have created their own problems. They've created situations that are unhealthy, unsanitary. They've taken down their own smoke detectors, whatever it may be. Who is going to be held responsible Landlord? Or the tenant? That's a question I have. I need an answer.
Who's responsible now under the state inspection program?
So that's a great that's a great question. So if a unit's inspected, and I ran into this once before with Sharon Kelly, I had a hoarder, and she froze her pipes because she couldn't even get to her windows, didn't realize they were open that much. Cold day. I couldn't get to those pipes because there's so much stuff in the way. I call Sharon. Sharon, what do I do? Trying to be proactive as a landlord. What can I do to remedy this situation? You know what her answer was to me? I can fine you until you get it fixed. There's nothing I can do for her. Nothing I can do about her. So again, where is the protection for the landlord in this when it's the tenant that's created the situation?
I think what we're talking about here, and that is on my list of questions. I think what we're talking about here are more health and safety code violations and not.
That's a health and safety code violation right there. If a tenant creates a hoarding situation where they can't get to their windows, they can't even get in the room sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question. I'm not sure that necessarily applies to whether or not we implement a rental registry and inspection service, but I think that's an incredibly unfortunate part of being a landlord.
It is. It's an incredibly unfortunate part of being a landlord because you know what the remedy is? Guess what I had to do?
Evict.
Exactly. Yeah. I had to throw that tenant out. And that's what you're going to have. That's exactly what this is going to create. I want to remind you of that.
It's okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else that has any comments they'd like to make on the rental registry? All right, let me.
I've been trying to let all the landlords and.
Come on up. Just gotta check Zoom too.
Some of this may be providing information or maybe asking questions. I felt like earlier,
Harlan, just state your name for
Harlan Smith, village resident, also a renter, city resident, sorry, everybody.
Okay,
I think Marcus was asking a little bit about like the elevator inspections and the sprinkler system inspections and so on and so forth. And I believe I've heard the landlord say that that the state comes in and inspects them every year. The state does not inspect them. Contractors inspect them that are certified by the state to do that. And the state never comes in, and this rental inspection program, they would not be inspecting them either. They would go in and make sure that the sticker was there to be that they had been inspected within a year. It's very similar to your car inspection, right? We all go to the garage, we have our car inspected. If we don't have it inspected, we drive around the road. If the cops catch us, we're in big trouble, but it's the same process. So the state's not coming into these buildings and inspecting these on a regular basis and then going beyond unless you're running some sort of state certified operation out of it, for instance, childcare. And then in the process of licensing, the state comes in, looks at the building and makes sure that all of those stickers are up to date and have been kept up to date. So that was, it seemed like there was some confusion about exactly how those types of items were taken care of. I'm in a rental property right now. I think there was a law that just recently changed about the smoke detectors and the CO2s and how they have to behave. I would have had no idea if my landlord hadn't showed up and said, I got to install these because the state requires it. And to be honest with you, I don't know when I'm supposed to inspect him again, or even if I'm supposed to, and if he's supposed to do it or they're supposed to do it. I see the pros and cons on both sides, and the biggest one, it's a little strange to me tonight with some of the conversations that I'm hearing. The biggest one seems to be money, which is going to be passed down. The landlords have stated that they're going to pass it down to the renters, which everybody understands. I mean, that's how that operation works. So there's a piece of me that I'm trying to understand if it's net zero for the landlords, why there would be a concern with a rental registry program. And then the other piece of it is, and nobody's asked this question or put it out there, is I would be curious if the opposition to the program would be the same if there was no fee associated with it, or would the program then be a good program? So I'm not sure how we answer that. But those are some of the thoughts that I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Thanks, Harlan. All right, I'm not seeing anyone on Zoom. I'm not seeing anyone with their hand up in the room, so I'll bring it back to the board. Anyone have anything else? Any final comments, questions? No? Okay, Regina, how you doing with what we've talked about so far? Chris?
I mean, the action items I have is to work on figuring out data, what kind of data sharing there is with this from the state right now. If there's a way to get invited to the inspections that they already do, and if we and the inspections that have been done with our fire department staff to collect some of that data and have it ready for.
Yeah. Does that cover kind of what you were looking for too?
Yeah, but the additional feedback about the fact that it seems like we're participating is kind of changed that a little bit, but yes.
No, yeah. I
Yes.
wonder what that, so you're wondering what it would look like for us to take that over. Okay.
And I do want to, and I apologize to the chief because I think I got clarity from the comment that I heard earlier from Matt, or sorry, Mike. Anyway, Rich, whatever. You got it. Mr. Smith, thank you.
Mr. Smith, please.
Man. In the fact that I remember the comment specifically, that conversation around the health officer and taking that on, and that was a responsibility that the fire department was okay taking on. So I apologize for putting those two things together. So.
And Regina, we're good.
I think I'm good.
Okay. All right.
Raj, the only other thing that I heard is there was general comment about wanting to bring that cost down. It might be helpful to identify what an ideal cost would be, so that way staff could create a program based on an ideal cost.
Well, I mean, I'm going to, I think I understand that if it was under the fire department, it would be there would be different numbers to work with. So it'd be nice to see a scenario where that we have a budget for that to look at.
Yeah, and I think we can, knowing that you would, I think we were waiting to see which direction you would lean in. If you would like the information of what the budget would look like under the fire department, we can look at that further, because I think there's some costs that we've heard would probably go down, but there's probably other costs that might go up. So we've just got to actually be able to look at that.
I mean, compared to our communities that I've looked at, South Burlington, Winooski, Solomons, Burlington, and Barry, we are in the top third for cost. Burlington's 110, Winooski's 115, South Burlington's now 150, St. Albans is 107. It'd be nice to get it, if there are ways to figure out how we lower that. But, again, we're still,
Mind you, some
we're still,
of us in Albans are only during inspection, so that.
we're still, excuse me, I'm still talking, thank you. We're still looking around for what we're trying to accomplish here, so it'd be good to start with the fire department and see how that compares to the community development department.
Would it also be helpful to consider the possibility of rolling out the registry part first versus registry and inspection?
And what does that look like? I mean, I'm no problem with that, especially if it makes it vastly cheaper, and there's a different paradigm to be achieved with the inspections. But it doesn't address some of it. We don't have to go down that road again. I think, anything else? Okay. All right, let's move on. Library grant is now 5B. Grant application for library roof and entry. Harlan, you're back.
I'm back.
Thanks, Chris. Just want to say I know who you are.
I like the civic aspect.
You like what?
I like the civic aspect.
Go home.
But does it matter? Is it Rich or is it?
I don't know.
Boss.
I'm just a staff.
Oh no, so much more than that.
Sorry.
Okay. So Harlan is here to talk about a grant that we're trying to get for the library roof and the front entrance. So you folks are aware that we've been trying to do this project because we've had it in the buildings maintenance fund. This grant opportunity, like many other grant opportunities right now, there's a lot of money on the table till basically 2026. And so we are trying to see if we can get some of this grant funds to help us with that project. It is likely to be pretty competitive.
Yes.
And so you've got a memo in your packet that describes the proposal. There's also a support letter that we would need to send in. We do have a site plan that we could show you that roughly looks at what we're looking to do. Or if you have any questions of Harlan, we can go that.
I wouldn't mind an incredibly brief view of the site plan, but I think we all get it. And we all support, I would venture a guess that we really support this. I mean, if there's a site plan digitally you can bring up for a second.
There is.
We've talked about this issue for, I think this is maybe my 10th meeting. So I think I can speak for everybody. We completely understand the issue.
Yep.
And are 100% in favor of not paying for the whole thing. So off you go. Let us know how much help you need. And if it's getting kind of late, if folks want to just receive that site plan in their email, I would also understand that. I'm not trying to discount what you're bringing to the table, Harlan. That went on a little longer than we thought. But again, we've all talked about this library issue. I think it's really exciting that we have an opportunity to get some of it paid for.
We do too, and we're very excited about it. And that's kind of the piece is that long time coming.
Yeah.
We see an opportunity where we might be able to actually get it done and get it paid for. We are being pushed by the building age to get some aspects of it done. So it does create some other issues, but we're excited about it that we may potentially have a shot at.
Yeah, and I'm excited about the ADA improvements, right, specifically. I think.
Correct.
So, yeah, that's great.
Okay.
When do they award this? Generally?
So we got to have the application in by March 12th. And then I want to say they said mid to early summer, late spring.
Yeah.
So it's going to be rapid.
Roughly.
It's going to be relatively quick shortly after the applications are put in.
And I guess the only other thing is we have the matching money in the building maintenance fund.
We don't require matching money, but we believe because of competitive that yes, we do have some money in that we are going to offer in the process of trying to make us a little more competitive, that we've already spent some money and that we've got some money that we're willing to invest into the project.
Okay.
Nice.
I, again, don't want to shortchange Harlan's, here we go. Okay.
It took a very long time, but essentially we're trying to make it so that somebody who is in a wheelchair can get from the bus stop up the ramp more easily and to the front main entrance, and switching the main entrance because there's all this like ice and issue in the corner.
Okay. So really addressing the slope. Okay.
Yeah, we're addressing the slope. There's a lot of hazard issues with that entranceway other than the ADA, and we're going to address all of it.
Okay.
I just like in case of an emergency, those people in a wheelchair have multiple options to get in or out of this building.
Yeah.
Versus one. So, thank you.
And it doesn't appear to be so simple to go in the youth entrance and make your way around to the adult entrance.
No, and this particular entrance is what is utilized as the main entrance. It's where the receiving desk is. This brings you, if you were to come in a wheelchair, if your area that you want to go downstairs, the elevator is directly as you come in through the door. Once we make this ADA accessible, it improves the operation and access to the library drastically.
Great. All right. I mean, if there are no other questions, I will move that the City of Essex Junction Council authorize the use of $100,000 for this project, and the City Council President sign the support letter. Great. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Great, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your work on this. Thank Wendy as well, please.
Harlan.
Thanks for sticking around.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Harlan. All right. 5C, discussion and consideration of the FY General Fund operating capital. All right.
So, got a memo in your packet, basically lays out that we reduced the budget by 2,404 from your last meeting, because that is getting us down to now the correct county tax.
Okay.
So the budget that you've got in front of you is 12,157. That's a estimated tax rate increase of 6.6. That gets us to $170 more for a $280,000 home. We are, again, the utility rates are just a, heads up for you to be thinking about that while you're thinking about this, but we don't finalize those till later in the spring as we get more data in to get those right. You've got the proposed budget amounts in the memo as well, and recommendation.
Okay, so does anyone have any, we didn't hear really any feedback on this budget tonight. Didn't get any feedback or suggestions necessarily on the budget to change it in the first public hearing. I've had personally one email, potentially two, asking for follow through on reducing the library budget, but no other comments on anything specific. So if folks are comfortable approving and warning this budget, we can move forward unless anybody has any.
I just want to ask a couple of questions. First off, my earlier comments about rental registry aside, why would the rental registry, because it's a fee-based system, why would it not be in enterprise versus here?
So it's a good question, and you can kind of see if you looked at the stormwater budget and how we have kind of an alternative in yellow on the side, we're attempting to explain how with both programs, they're not set up yet, so we have to evolve to it. Essentially, we would, once it's up and running and we've got it set up, we would evolve to a place where it lives in its own budget like that. But because particularly, and again, the reason why we set up the rental registry program the way that we did is because we really wanted to have some increased availability for code enforcement more generally in the land development code. It's the way the whole program was put together based on that goal. So there is some connection that's still happening there within the community development department. But essentially, we would probably, if this gets all up and running in your next budget, you'd probably see it totally separate, so you could clearly and easily see expenses and revenues and make sure that they match.
The other question I have is in regards to, because I'm still struggling with the overall increase, but I do want to understand the assigned and unassigned. Can we reassign what's assigned or not? If I don't even want to go further down that particular road, but is that possible or not?
Amber's making a great face.
Is this like the known unknowns and the known knowns?
There's the unassigned fund balance and the assigned fund balance.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if on the assigned fund balance, can that be reassigned somewhere else? If those priorities that are assigned are not the same as they were when they were assigned.
Oh, sort of like a BAA.
Budget Adjustment Act?
Correct.
I get it now.
And then, again, talking about we brought this up the last time, and I'm still struggling with the overall increase. There's $880,000 roughly in the unassigned fund balance. Art. I want to word this correctly. I'm just gonna be clumsy about it.
Late, be clumsy. You got
I believe the last time I brought this up, or that we discussed this, we kind of, as a majority, felt like, no, we need to protect this money here versus using it to try to help bring this tax rate down. And I'm struggling to, again, find ways to continue to tweak this. And I understand where we are at the 12th hour, but that's one thing that I was thinking about looking at. The other is, and I have gotten feedback about the library as well. And again, it's not about picking on any particular department, but one of the things that my own analysis again is, in our discussions over the last few weeks, every department has contributed something to try to bring this number down a little. This one department has not. And I know we did not move that forward to try to say, look, you have to lower this. But in all fairness, it feels like here's one department that's getting a pass where every other department has contributed something to help try to bring this number down. But again, their increase is not the biggest pool of money either, so it's not necessarily going to bring this down by any significant amount, even if I were to say, cut it, so. But anyways, those are my thoughts and struggles at the moment.
I wouldn't say that the library is getting a pass, especially since for the last 2 years, there have been significant errors in the city side calculating their payroll. And so they've been basing their budgets on incorrect information. And so their ask was reduced by almost 3% simply by correcting that mistake. So I don't necessarily,
But it's still $52,000.
And they justified it as we requested them to do.
Correct.
I think, Virginia, I think you were going to say something. Really good.
Oh, sorry.
So just pointing out that we've got Jess on, and so I think I was just trying to go back to answer your question about the assigned and unassigned fund balance question.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you're referring to the memo that describes the assigned fund balances from the end of the prior fiscal year.
There is a memo there that indicates that, but it brought up this question for me, generally speaking.
Okay. So, Jess, the question is, when we're looking at those assigned fund balances at the end of the fiscal year, is any of that available? Can it be used to help lower the general fund budget? And how does that work?
No. So most of those amounts that are assigned are revenue or savings that resulted from a specific project and has to stay with that project. It's not to say that it couldn't be, there are some that could be reassigned by the council, but some of those assignments are already in place in the current budget. So like one of the assignments, if I can, I was just trying to pull up the memo here. So one of the assignments is the finance separation. So we had just under $2,600 left over that we did not spend in FY23 for all of the finance separation work. That's already being used right now because the separation was carrying over into FY24. So that money's being used as we speak. So that can't be reassigned. Salary study, same thing. It's in process for this fiscal year. The money's actually already been spent this current fiscal year, so that cannot be reassigned.
Okay, that's fine. That answers my question well enough, so thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Jess. Thank you, Jess. All right, well, I was moving along earlier and forgot to bring up, ironically, forgot to bring up the whole issue of whether we want to leave the rental registry lines in or remove them. It's largely at this point a semantic conversation. It's not impacting the tax rate. It does transmit our intention to keep considering this, but we've already done that pretty strongly, I think. What it might do is confuse people to the point where they might not support it. So curious what folks want to do. We'll just do a little straw poll. I think we've talked if we understand the issue.
I would say keep it in. I really don't think I don't think a significant majority would end up not voting for this because of seeing the semantic of a revenue offsetting program.
I would remove it.
If it were kept in, or excuse me, if it were removed and we entered FY '25 and got to the point where we were ready to go, pushing it out to FY '26 because it wasn't in the budget to begin with.
I'm told no. I'm told we can start the program mid-year, basically.
Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, and what would the impact be if it was removed? It's neutral, so the 6.6 wouldn't change.
Nothing would change.
Right.
It would be a little bit clearer, frankly, because it does look like there's an FTE being added, and you have to read carefully to understand that it's being offset by fees.
Right.
So I can explain it in any number of ways. Like I said, I think we've been crystal clear about the fact that we're going to continue to talk about the rental registry. So
Right.
not transmitting that, I think, has been taken care of. I think we're going to continue to transmit that this is under consideration. So, Amber, what do you think?
Remove.
I say remove it, make it simpler, just clearer.
Yeah.
It's just easier to understand. It's easier to explain. It's not there. We don't have to explain it. And we just keep being very forthright. Either we're going to continue talking about this, or at some point we pull the plug, and we're just very careful about how that messaging goes out.
So just real quick, so staff are 100% certain that after a budget has been approved by the voters, we're allowed to add a revenue source and an expense source without their approval. That's where I'm going to. Like, that's not certain on that. That's my only hesitation. That's why I would say keep it. If there's potential, then we have that without having to either ask the voters to approve of a budget change because this revenue didn't exist before, neither did the expense, or it waits until FY26.
Yeah, we just wait a year.
Yeah, we've thought about it and nearly certain we can add it as a new program because it's offset and it's not actually on the tax rate.
If you're confident in it, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
But
South
there's
Burlington just approved it.
for revenue.
South Burlington just approved theirs. It's already on their website. Register for the rental registry. That was just last week. Same fiscal year. I don't know if it was in their FY24 budget. So maybe it was.
To contemplate it, yeah, I'm not.
I don't know if it was in there as a placeholder. Well,
I'm hearing staff are confident with it. I'd just say move along, take it out.
How do you feel? We don't do it tonight. We get back together Monday or Tuesday to warn it then, and I really don't want to do that. So if we want to be absolutely 190% sure, I'd change my mind. But if you all are feeling like, I mean, I wonder if my thinking was, and you're much more knowledgeable about budgets, but both are, and Jess is here, and frankly, Elaine, everybody. My understanding was we could start something within a department and hire a person to do it. Are you worried about the revenue part of it? Because at any point during a budget year, can't we decide that we're going to basically expand a department? As long as it's revenue neutral, or is it
where my hesitation is coming in is the concept of municipality is then responsible to. Right. And so by changing that budget, by adding in new revenue and by adding in new expenses without their approval, because that would change what the voters have already approved. That's what I'm not sure is allowed in the charter. So that's where my hesitation comes in. But I don't know the answer to the question. And so that's why I was saying staff are confident, good with that.
And we're likely to have to spend money before we take money in.
Yeah, and the concept of the way it was working now is your current FY24 budget does have some component of this other full-time position in it.
Right.
And so there's revenue because we haven't hired it's in there for full-time, but 50% at lot revenue and then the other half at general fund revenue. So we could, there are some expenses within this fiscal year to start it off.
Without it next year.
Without any source whatsoever to get started. And we would have upfront expenses. I mean, within and this is a little bit tricky because we're talking about possibility of two separate departments. Like there is, everybody can stay within their budget so long as it doesn't go over the department level budget. If we had to switch gears.
And if we leave it as is, right, in CD, in the FY25 budget, and then pivot to fire department. And it wasn't approved that way.
So I will simply say that I agree with Andrew's concern about starting at mid-year, but I also said that I'm okay taking this out with the understanding that I was also okay with rental registry as a program not starting until FY26. So for me personally, I'm totally fine moving this forward. We know we're going to have the conversation. I'd like to see it taken out of the budget, but I'm okay with that program not starting till later. But I would have the same concern, Andrew, start the program mid-year.
It is an ordinance, right? Ultimately, it's an ordinance. It's an approved ordinance that lays out something that will happen. But without the funding for the person, it ain't happening. Just thinking this through in my head. Just trying to remember, like, we can approve an ordinance anytime.
There is no rush.
There is no rush.
And the more we
that's
talk,
18 months from roughly 16 or 18 months before we get it going.
the more we talk about it, the more unanswered questions there are, and the more options appear. And I personally am frustrated by the new information that comes to light every time we talk. So I would be more in favor of taking our time and doing more research and answering our questions, and that may delay things. And we may find out that there are additional costs that we haven't accounted for, or less costs. We may come up with a completely different model that costs 50% less.
I think a priority for me is to keep the budget as simple and clear as possible,
Yeah.
as I stated before. So I'm comfortable removing it. And if this has to wait, it has to wait. If we find out we're in the clear and we're ready, we can move forward. But I think it's going to be it will complicate things for some folks that are, if they're involved, to understand why are we adding an FTE? How is this all working? It's a 6.6% increase. It's not the time to be adding something.
Yeah.
That kind of message will be more difficult to get through than that. So I would advocate for removing it, still advocate for removing it.
I honestly think that we have the option to make this decision, not just based on our desire to have a rental registry, but also to acknowledge, basically to read the room. We've got the school tax increase. We've got the budget increase we're talking about right now. Utility rates are going up. We have the ability to control when certain things happen and mitigate those costs and be mindful of the impact that what we're deciding has on the taxpayers.
So it sounds like the group is in agreement that we'll remove it from the budget. Doesn't change the bottom line. And I think we've been through this ad nauseum. So we have a motion on the bottom of packet page 14.
So let
We
me
need
just
to read out the amounts. It says as presented, but I think we have to read them.
So Jess, I have it in paper form. I don't know if you can share it on the screen, but essentially the budget without rental registry is 12,004,124.
What is it again?
12,004,124.
Regina, I can share the spreadsheet, but I don't have, I'm not able to share.
Oh. Could you zoom in?
Yep. So the highlighted amounts are the two that you're looking for the warning.
Yep. And we've got both versions printed out here for your signature, so.
So what do I need to read, or just as presented? Because these aren't as presented anymore in the memo anyway. So I should say $12,004,124, of which $11,110,346 will be raised in taxes.
Yeah.
In property taxes. Okay. All right. I move that the city council approve the FY25 general fund operating capital program budgets. The general fund being $12,004,124, of which $11,110,346 will be levied in property taxes. And I don't know if I need to read the capital fund budgets as well.
I think the rest is just as presented.
And the capital budgets as presented.
I'll second.
No discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Need a roll call. Andrew?
Nay.
Marcus?
Nay.
Elaine?
Aye.
Amber?
Aye.
And I am aye. 3-2, motion carries. Thank you. All right. And we can't forget to sign those tonight.
Um,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we can sign the vote.
Yeah. Just, you don't vote yes.
Might not agree with the decision, but.
All right. Discussion and consideration of warning for annual meeting.
Okay, so that's in your packet as well. So we just talked about that. We have the alternative of if the budget changes. Informational meeting will be April 1st, online only. We have changed the annual meeting date to April 8th. In the last meeting, when you looked at this, it was town meeting day. It sounds like the school district is opting to not move to town meeting day for at least another year. My understanding is they're acknowledging the challenges with budget work this year, and April is a little bit helpful. So also, we have our current charter changes that the voters passed last year. Those may pass the legislature this year, but they are not passed right now, so we've got to put this question to the voters. Sorry, what else is in here? There's the Capital Improvement Economic Development Fund tax. Did talk with Claudine about this, and essentially we can approve it on this 3-year basis, just like you've been approving it before. Essentially, the voters are okaying it now. We actually put it in the budget that they approve in the following years, and so that's how it is actually going to the budget, going to the voters to approve it each year.
Okay.
We did not get any petitions for ballot questions, and that's that.
Great. Seems pretty straightforward. If there's no discussion, I'll move that the city council approve the warning as drafted.
Second.
Great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Great. Motion passes. Next item is a executive session. So we have a very short consent agenda. Do I motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Great. Council member comments, city manager report. If you'd like to go.
I have some stuff. I'll try to be super fast.
Okay.
So, on Tuesday, March 5th in the city, folks will be, there's a presidential primary, and there is also a bond vote for Champlain Water District. The intent of that bond vote is for 3.2 million dedicated to what was previously approved in a September 2022 bond for a raw water parallel transmission main. They are essentially repurposing that for a SCADA upgrade. That is the same infrastructure software system that we use at the wastewater treatment facility. The improvement will allow the district to continually be in a position to supply safe, affordable drinking water 24 hours a day. 4 hours a day.
I think
Surround sound.
Tim just joined.
Okay. And so that's what it's there. That's what that bond vote is about. So folks are aware that is not ours. It's Champlain Water District. They're a separate municipality, but they do supply the city with water. So ultimately, that the cost of that they're estimating to be not an increase of less than $4 per year in the wholesale water rates. And eventually that, so people will see that, but it's not a direct bond vote for the city. Also for Champlain Water District, there's a survey that's out there. It's a randomized survey, so not everybody got it, but essentially it's an income survey from Champlain Water District. And their goal is to try to understand actual income levels, because when you go to the Vermont Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, loan rates and the ability to have loan forgiveness is based on income of a municipality. So they're trying to get a better sense of the income of folks that they serve so that the rates could potentially be improved. So if folks could fill out that survey, that would be great. We have received some eclipse viewing glasses, so you can get those on the 5th if you go and vote. They're also available here at the clerk's office, and the library has some as well. The Vermont Downtown Designation Board approved our expanded boundary of the neighborhood development area designation, so that's very exciting. There's lots of housing incentives in that program. And then lastly, right down here on Lincoln Street, we had a sewer line problem. So that is now fixed, and the plan is to try to pave that over next week, but that is going to be a challenge on our sanitation fund balance, which is already challenged.
Goody.
Should have started that with that maybe, and then ended with the other.
Yeah, happy stuff. Well, it's nice that it's fixed, and it's nice that they probably had warmer weather than normal
Yeah,
for them to
really.
work on it. So
Yeah.
thanks to that crew.
I had one small thing.
Sure.
Tomorrow morning, I've been asked to testify at House of Government Operations on their municipal ethics bill proposal. So there is a committee bill on a code of ethics for municipal officers. And I was invited to testify.
What are your thoughts?
It's a committee bill that was written predominantly by the Ethics Commission, the State Commission, with very, very, very little input from municipalities. And VLCT is making recommendations for the bill. My interest in it stemmed from, I submitted testimony when they called for public comment, and I just said it would be great if there was some mechanism for non-retaliation and protection for whistleblowers, because while the state labor laws protect employees from retaliation, there is nothing in place to protect elected officials who raise issues in their own community. So they want to hear about that.
What time is that?
10:45.
Is the proposal more strict than what the legislature itself has to abide by?
I can't answer that.
Just out of curiosity.
I don't know. It interestingly repeals a requirement for all municipalities to establish a conflict of interest policy, and then lays out what they want municipalities to do. It sort of kind of sets up a parallel system outside of the municipality that personally makes me a little nervous because the potential for confusion is enormous. So
Great. I don't have anything except to say it's really amazing. Because people are having a hard time finding all the things. That's great. Where we got them? Okay.
Vermont Department of Tourism. I
Oh,
believe is
perfect.
the
Okay. Hopefully they've got a cow on. Collectors. Any reading file comments? Nope. Great. The executive session motion is.
I have it.
Yeah.
I move that the city council make a specific finding that premature disclosure of the contractual matters would place the city at a substantial disadvantage. I move that the city council enter into executive session to discuss contracts pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1A to include the city council and city manager.
Second both.
That motion's made and seconded. All those in favor to both motions say aye.
Aye.
Are we coming? We're not coming back? We don't have anything to come back to. We're not deciding anything. So we'll adjourn on our own.